finished, still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
That's right, we are broadcasting all the way from the Deep South, all the way from Forest Tower Studios. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void, your voice for verity in this crazy realm of polarity. It is August the 16th, Thursday, and the night is beautiful finally. The clouds have cleared up here, but I need you to do one thing, because this is what we do when we start the show up every night. I need you to fire up your chakras, sync both hemispheres of your brain together, and shoot your magical beam of light through your third eye tonight with us as we peer into the void on our search for truth. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335 when we open the phones up. That's if we open the phones up. And tonight we're going to be speaking with Dean Radin, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Dean Radin about his newest book, Real Magic. And that is a topic that we love here. His analysis on the subject is wonderful. I've been reading the book myself, and all I can say is that it's awesome. It's really cool to hear some of his analysis on this, his intelligence. I mean, to discuss the reality of the subject is wonderful, and the way he does it, I mean, it pretty much epitomizes a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. So I want to say I think you're going to enjoy this tonight. I also want to say thank you to all who have donated to the show, and all of you guys in Spreaker chat. I see you giving me shouts out. Tim, Yeg, all of you guys, I love you. And even if you don't donate, even if you can't, all the liking, subscribing, and sharing and stuff you've been doing is just wonderful. It's been great, and we're having a good ride so far. And Thursday night, it's the last night of the week here, so we've been talking a lot of science, magic, and spirituality. Last night, we talked to, Thomas Campbell, and we talked to Thomas Campbell about the larger consciousness system, and now we're talking to Dr. Dean Radin. So it's, man, it doesn't really get better than this. I do want to say real quick, I got to do some quick business. This show is brought to you by Audible. So all of you, if you want to get an Audible book, just like you can get Dr. Dean Radin's book, Real Magic, from Audible for free right now. If you go to audibletrial.com/LTV radio, you get a free book with that. And it's a 30-day free trial, and they'll hook you right up. Grab a t-shirt or use the Amazon portal as well. And follow, like, subscribe. Everything on social media is Lighting the Void. If you want to go to the Discord chat so you can drop links for show notes, pictures, and videos and all that good stuff, that is lightingthevoid.com/chat. And the newsletter, you could just put your name and email in there. It's at the top right, and you get that for free. It comes out once a month. And I know you can tell I'm eager to get this going. This subject is one of my favorites. So I have to say thank you to my team, Eric Markham, Jeremy Scott, and all the insiders who help me every day. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Also, don't forget the hashtag is LTV Radio. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get this thing going. And we have with us right now Dr. Dean Radin. Now, Dr. Dean Radin is the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and Associated Distinguished Professor of Integral and Transpersonal Psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. He earned an MS in Electrical Engineering and a Ph.D. in Psychology from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Before joining the research staff at IONS in 2001, he held appointments at AT&T Bell Labs, Princeton University, University of Edinburgh, and SRI International. He is the author or co-author of hundreds of technical and popular articles, 4 book chapters, and 4 popular books: The Conscious Universe, Entangled Minds, Supernormal, and the one we're going to talk about tonight, Real Magic. I think, guys, I've finally found a book, I would say, and this is just my opinion, for the skeptic of magic to read. Not to change his mind or persuade his beliefs on the subject, but to give the believer a real chance at an argument or debate of the existence of magic. And you can go to the website at deanradin.org. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Doc. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I got to say that I'm super impressed with the book. I'm almost done with it, as I was telling you before the show started. And I think that you just laid it all down perfect. step by step. And I did hear just a little tad and towards the end of the book, and I would want to just jump right in here and ask you this. Do you find it frustrating that science isn't taking this more seriously right now?
Well, sometimes, yes. It seems like progress is slow. But on the other hand, if you pay attention to debates within the scientific world, there are people who are screaming at each other all the time. Because whenever you're dealing with the edge of the known, almost by definition, nobody completely understands it yet. And so there are lots of debates and theories, and people are arguing about evidence and so on. That's just what happens in science all the time. So here we're talking about basically the edge of the known. It has a very long history to it, as you read in the book, but we still don't know very much about exactly what is going on, and that's why the debate continues. So I completely understand why some people are very skeptical about these things, because when I started looking into this some 40 years ago, I was just as skeptical. It took a long time before I finally was able to convince myself, based on the evidence, that there really was something going on.
Now, in the terms of magic, I know you've been studying consciousness like forever, but in the terms of magic, and what I mean by magic is either, let's say, theurgy or even manifestation, these types of magic. Have you been studying that just as long? I mean, when did you get into the actual... Because most of us think, when we think ceremonial magic, and I've stated this before, some person thinks about some wizard out in the woods drawing a circle and doing some weird chant, and it's just really strange and odd to a layman or somebody that probably doesn't understand what or why they're doing that. But that kind of magic, I mean, when did you start getting into that, thinking, well, there's probably something to this too?
Well, as I describe in the book, that if somebody had asked me a couple of years ago, was I studying magic? The answer would be no, that's ridiculous. I'm a scientist. I'm studying things that we can look at in the laboratory. And then somebody reminded me that what are the of magic? What are we actually dealing with when we're talking about magic? Mm-hmm. And looking at that and then reminding myself of this long history about magic, I suddenly realized, to my shock almost, that the kinds of work that we've been doing in the laboratory for many years, not just me, but my colleagues around the world, it is studying the practice of magic. And so to clarify that, most people think of magic as ceremonial magic, as you said, people in dark robes doing something weird out in the woods. But that's a particular kind of ritual. Magic is much, much richer than that. So if you go back through the entire history, you see that there are three categories of things that people have called magical practice. So one big category is divination. So this is use of the I Ching or tarot cards or throwing the runes, you name it. There's tea leaves, the whole thing. It's all about perception through time and space. That's what divination is. The second big category I call force of will, which you use the word manifestation, which is similar. It's the idea that your intentions can cause something to happen in the world. And the third category you also mentioned, theurgy. Theurgy is closer to ceremonial magic, where the idea is that you will attempt to evoke or communicate with spirits to do something on your behalf. So that's what 10,000 years of different traditions and different cultures, it all basically boils down to those three types. So in divination, then, perception through time and space, another term for that is psychic phenomena. That's what psychic phenomena is, at least the perceptual side. It's about extending your awareness through space and time. That is something that can be done in the laboratory and has been done in the laboratory since 1882. So there's a long scientific history about looking at that particular domain, this domain of divination. The second category of force of will, in the laboratory we call it psychokinesis, mind-matter interactions. So that's also been going on for about 100 years.
Right.
The third category on theurgy is done in the laboratory through studies of mediumship, channeling, near-death experience, and things like that. So the bottom line is that science has been looking at the practices of magic without using those terms for over a century. And so there's some things that could be said about it. Does divination exist? The answer is yes. Does force of will exist? Yes. Does theurgy exist? Yes, it does. It's not like what you see in the movies. Of course, nothing is like what you see in the movies.
Right.
But it's in that direction. And so when asked, does magic exist as practice? The answer is yeah, it does.
What I've found is that I'm curious about how it works. And I always get this response back like, oh, you're never going to figure out how it works. Just be good with knowing the fact of that it works. Well, I used to just say, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I need to just back off of that. But I find I'm not the only one curious about that. I mean, even in your book, you make a statement about technology. We use we know how they work as far as how to take a picture and how to use our phones, but the actual structure and how these things are built from the ground up, most of us we don't have a clue. And right. I'm curious about how magic works as far as what we could know about how it works. And I think Thomas Campbell, who we talked to before tonight, who talks about the larger consciousness system, which, is debatable, I would say, and with some people. But do you think that that's the basic structure of this? Just one large consciousness system, like he calls it an entropy reduction trainer inside a large consciousness system? Yeah,
I would say that he's on the right track. That's the same conclusion that I've reached, and actually an increasing number of scientists are coming to that conclusion as well. And what it comes down to is that normally we're taught that the physical world is all there is. That's like the basis of what we know about is physics. So we learn about electrons and protons and things like that. And that is what we're usually taught is the bottom. It's a thing on which everything else sits. And yet things like magic, psychic phenomena, they don't work well with. It's very difficult to explain how something like magic could exist if you start with electrons, say, or even subatomic particles as the basis of everything. It doesn't work. And that's one of the reasons, in fact, the main reason why a lot of scientists would say, if you ask them about magic or telepathy or clairvoyance or something like that, they'll say, no, it's impossible, because the physical world doesn't allow that. And yet we know from laboratory experiments that the phenomena are actually real. It does exist. So there's the incompatibility. What do we do with our scientific model of the world, which doesn't account for what we can actually see in the laboratory? Well, Thomas Campbell and myself and a bunch of other people now are beginning to think that there's something peculiar about the nature of consciousness that is probably much more fundamental than we had previously thought. And one of the things that I go through in some detail in the book then is saying, well, the scientific worldview is relatively new. It's a young idea. It's only a couple hundred years old. The previous worldview that persisted for at least 10,000 years is quite different. It can be stated in 3 words. It's that consciousness is fundamental. That's what every mystic throughout history has said. That's what all of the esoteric traditions say, that there's ultimately consciousness writ large, meaning some kind of universal consciousness, is exactly the same thing as the thing inside your head that you call me. It's that little spark of consciousness in each of us that is identical to the consciousness of the universe. So it seems like that's a pretty far stretch, but nevertheless, that's what you read again and again and again. All of the esoteric traditions say that. So if that is true, as Tom Campbell and others are saying now, that there's something really fundamental about consciousness, then to try to understand why magic works becomes actually pretty simple. If you start with physics as we know it today, it's very difficult. If you start with consciousness, it's very easy.
Right. So it's always better to use analogies or structure analogies to try to explain it than actually get down to the material science of it. Because I think that there is like last night we were talking about the microtubule hologram theory, and then he was like, that's just somebody trying to put materialism to it. It's way bigger than that. It's more than that. And I think, do you think that we can ever get down to the answer to this on a material level? Because I'm starting to think that the mystery is there for a reason.
Well, the problem, of course, is that this is consciousness trying to understand itself. If it is true that consciousness is fundamental, then you're having the fundamental thing trying to understand itself, which might be a logical impossibility. So I think we can get closer and closer. We can get much, much further than we are today, certainly. But whether we can understand ourselves in a fundamental way, that's a good question. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point.
Right. Yeah, that is a fascinating point of view. Are you saying that, like, the consciousness structure that, that makes this whole thing up is trying to express itself or maybe figure itself out through us and through existence, through life? Because that's one of the biggest questions of life, Dr. Radin, is why? I mean, if there's this consciousness, why are we here?
Why are we here? Yep, that's part of the big questions. Why are we here? What's it all about? Is there a purpose? All of that. Well, of course, we don't know the correct answers, but if you think of this from a perspective of some kind of background universal consciousness, the whole thrust of evolution seems to be to develop more and more aware systems. So we're a physical system that happens to have a spark of awareness in us. We struggle all the time to try to figure out who and what we are, at least when we have the luxury of time to think about such things. And that seems to have been the whole push of evolution. So I expect if you follow the arrow of this evolution, that eventually, if a society or a species is able to not be so aggressive that it destroys itself, then a whole planet can become aware, and then maybe a whole solar system and a whole galaxy and so on. You can get larger and larger collectives that become aware. And similar to the way that we imagine that we're aware. I mean, we know when we're awake and we're sleeping and so on. So that kind of awareness doesn't seem to be bound by a human structure. It might be that other kinds of structures can also hold awareness. That doesn't mean that the structure gives rise to the awareness. In other words, like a lot of neuroscientists today would say that the brain is consciousness. The brain is giving rise to consciousness. It's generating it somehow. But that might be completely backwards. It might be that consciousness is always there. It's always in the background, but it can only express itself in certain kinds of structures. And so the human brain is a particular kind of structure that allows consciousness to be received, almost like a very fancy radio tuner.
Earlier in the week, we discussed his documentary, The 21 Faces of God, with Robert Bonomo, and he was speaking about the tarot and the arcana, and Joseph K., who was in the chat room, who said, well, these are like the applications behind a really big software. And it seems like maybe that's true, because if you look at magic on that level, when it comes to using symbols, as magicians always do, if it wasn't real, they wouldn't keep doing it for time and millennia. So there's something to that, obviously. Would you agree? Yeah.
So at the leading edge of physics today and mathematics and even neuroscience, there are physicists, I'm talking about thought leaders now. These are not fringe people, but dead center mainstream people who lead the pack. They're saying things like reality is information. Reality is mathematics. Reality is symbols. Reality is linguistics. This is like one tiny little step away from magic, because that is exactly what is said in magic. And the magical worldview basically says that we live in this giant pot of information or mathematics or symbols. If we start manipulating the symbols, as in writing magic or word magic, you literally change the nature of reality itself. And that, I think you're right. That's why these magical practices have persisted, sometimes way underground, but in other times in history above board. They do it because it works. The thing is that we're so biased by fiction, by what we see in the movies and what we read about in science fiction and so on, that we imagine that magic is easy to do and that it's always gigantic. And neither of those are true. Magic is not particularly easy to do, and the results of magic are not always gigantic things that happen. But that doesn't mean it's not real. And in fact, we know from laboratory experiments where we do these kinds of practices under highly controlled conditions that you could evoke these things. You can see them in the laboratory. So we know it's real. It's just, it's not the same as we see in the movies.
Well, I've got to say that I'm so glad that there's someone out there like you that's doing this with such a magnificent background of education, and you make it a note on your website, hey, look, I'm not a therapist, nor am I a psychic or a paranormal investigator. I'm a scientist who conducts research on psychic phenomena. If you're disturbed by psychic phenomena, I recommend that you contact a psychologist or psychiatrist knowledgeable about these experiences. And I was thinking, so when people come to you, like I may ask you a question about advice or something, does that bother you a little bit? But you're more of you're just studying this and putting out the information that you found?
Well, depending on the nature of the question, if it's something that I think I know the answer to, I'm happy to answer. If it's something that requires a certain expertise, like a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, I'm very quick to admit I don't know what to do. That's not my expertise, so I'll send the person off to somebody who does know what to do.
But I don't know.
By the way,
just extremely respectful.
Just as a side note here, your accent is reminding me that I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia.
Really?
So you can't hear that Southern accent in my voice anymore because it kind of went away. I've been around the world a number of times, but yeah, when I was a kid, I spoke with an accent similar to yours.
When you were a child, you started out as a musician, right? Like you started out in strings and the violin and...
right. Yeah, I played the violin for 20 years. And then when I was in graduate school, I switched into bluegrass banjo. So I played in bluegrass bands for about 5 years. And then once I started working full-time, I didn't have time to play music anymore. So in the corner of my office where I'm speaking now, I see my guitar. I have 2 banjos. I have 2 fiddles. They're off there in the corner, and they just stare at me. They mock me for not playing them.
And you went at all these things, like you pursued other interests in electrical engineering, physics, and you just went on and on. I'm just wondering, at what point did consciousness grab a hold of you? That's just kind of what I'm trying to figure out about your past. When did it grab you and then make it your biggest focus? At what point?
Actually, I remember a moment when it occurred to me that what I'm studying is consciousness. And before that, I didn't really get it. So I was at a conference on parapsychology. People are talking about studies of telepathy and clairvoyance and so on. So one of the researchers is talking about telepathy tests. And at some point in that talk, he said, well, ultimately, it's not that telepathy is a thing. It's a word that we use to talk about experiences that seem to involve one person's mind interacting with another person's mind. But underneath it all, we're talking about the nature of consciousness. Because without consciousness, people wouldn't have the experiences that they can report. So all psychic experiences are basically sitting on consciousness. And so I remember thinking, oh, that's much bigger than I was thinking before. I was thinking, well, how do we figure out how telepathy works? Well, you can't know how telepathy works until you have a better idea about what consciousness is and how that works. So that was maybe 30 years ago where I was at that conference and heard that, and that really turned a key in my head about what is it that I'm actually interested in. At that point, I understood that this really is about the nature of consciousness and the role that it plays in the physical world.
Yeah, and I notice in your bio that there's a lot of people that actually are behind your work that even Wikipedia didn't recognize, and so this gives me hope because I don't know why. I guess maybe it's because I'm way deep down south in Arkansas and I'm stuck in this studio that I still feel like that magic is taboo. But in reality, I mean, if you look at the demographics, the groups on Facebook, some of the scientists, including yourself that we've talked to, it's becoming closer to in the zeitgeist. I think it's not. We don't have to hide in lodges or in the woods anymore, to talk about it.
Well, it is still taboo. It's taboo both from a religious perspective, because in some religions teach that these kinds of things are demonic, and there are a lot of people who believe that, and so they would shy away from these ideas because they're afraid of them, or they've been taught to fear them. It's also taboo from a scientific perspective, for reasons that we discussed, that it doesn't seem how we can fit this into the scientific worldview. On the other hand, we ran a survey where we asked about 1,000 people what experiences had they had. We had 25 different experiences. Most of them were things like telepathy and clairvoyance, but some were simpler, like intuition, gut feelings, that sort of thing. So we had three categories of people: general public, people who are enthusiastic about these ideas, and also scientists and engineers. So we asked, out of these 25 different kinds of experiences, how many of them have you experienced? And have you experienced at least one of them? So what we found is that among the general public, 94% of the general public reports having had at least one of these kinds of experiences. So that's like huge majority of the public have had a personal experience of these kinds of phenomena. And then we say, well, what about among scientists and engineers? 93%. Wow. So we're talking about a very strange taboo where almost everyone has had an experience of magic, of psychic phenomena, of strange synchronicities, and so on. And yet it's still considered a fringe topic, which is really, really strange. Everyone, it's like the elephant in the room. We all see it, but nobody is willing to talk about it except late at night on radio shows.
Right. And when your book starts off, it has it really grabs you, because it's almost like, I don't want to give the book away, but it's almost like you're in the setting of a future where magic might actually be something understood, and then you just kind of give the setting, which I'll leave it at that. Before we take our break, do you think that's a possibility? Do you think maybe in the next 100 years that it could actually become a normal thing, and our society could advance by knowing that this is real?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, the history of science shows very clearly that everything used to be considered only in supernormal or supernatural terms, but then science has slowly begun to understand all kinds of things. And this is just one other element of the natural world, which is still uncertain, but we're pretty clever. And I think eventually we'll get to the point where we actually understand what's going on.
I can't wait. I hope you're right about that. Guys, we're going to take our first break. We're here with Dr. Dean Radin. We're talking about his book, Real Magic. If you want to, go out and grab it right now. Use the links on the website. I recommend it personally. I'm reading it. It's a great book. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
To Lighting the Void Radio.
The truth is out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTOK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM. Nights on The Fringe FM just got even better. You wanted more live late night programming?
Do it live!
Now you've got it. Don't miss The Paranormal Code with Rich Giordano at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, yeah.
Followed by Lighting the Void with me, Joe Roop, at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. There's something more to it. And bringing us home is Ryan Gable at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern.
These secret teachings.
Live all night. And the best of The Fringe FM all day.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Hey folks, guess what the number one phrase that Life Change Tea receives by email? You ready? We love this tea. We love this tea. Time after time, week after week, we love this tea. Life Change Tea gives you more energy, a beautiful cleansing, and fulfills its slogan perfectly. The tea that makes you go. So if you want to be on your health game, log on to getthetea.com and order Life Change Super Strength Tea. Packages come in a 1-month supply, and when you brew this stuff, wait until you see the results. Aren't we all about the results? And with a lot of people's health struggling, we can use a little bit of help. Doctors will tell you disease starts in the gut. So log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Be our next email saying, I love this tea. I love this tea. Get the tea at getthetea.com. Helping America, one tea bag at a time.
This is Jason Lindgren from Crow 777 Radio, and you can hear us 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday night here on the Fringe FM.
Ew, yuck. They're unhealthy. Bugs. I hate bugs. Our home is clean, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. From contact, it kills bugs. Plus, Orange Guard kills hidden bugs and keeps new bugs away for weeks. The ingredients in Orange Guard are on the FDA generally regarded as safe list, so Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard, available at orangeguard.com and Ace Hardware.
Hi folks, CBD is the home run hitter for health right now. Why, you ask? Because of what it does for the body. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the benefit. You know, there's reasons. Do your due diligence and log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com. Ancient Life Oil uses organic ingredients and is blended in coconut oil for some of the best benefits. Legal in 50 states and non-psychoactive. Log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com.
Select Joe Roop at checkout at ancientlifeoil.com. Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. Don't forget, we are here for you every night, Monday night through Thursday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. And then after the show, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable comes on. We're here with Dr. Dean Radin, and we're talking about his newest book, Real Magic. And the title says it all. That's what we're talking about, real magic and how it's real. And I guess before the break, we were talking about the progress of it. Maybe, hopefully, that in the future it'll be a little bit more accepted and even a norm. And that was going to be my next question, Dr. Radin. Do you think it's just called magic simply because it's a science that we don't understand yet? And that term might actually change one day in the future?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sure that is the case. Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author, had that famous phrase of any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so it is also true for science. Any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. Just like if you ask the average person, tell me how your cell phone works or your smartphone, how does it work? Well, they'll tell you how to operate it. But they say, no, I want to know, like, how is the screen made? How is it doing that? And how am I able to pick up the phone and call any one of 7 billion people in the world in 1 second? How does that happen? Well, there's a lot of people who are responsible for building the phone and building the telephone networks and so on. So individuals may not, like every individual involved, may not know all of the details, but collectively, we're able to do things that look like magic. Eventually, when we get to real magic, there will be individuals who know bits and pieces of it, but I think it'll be so complex that it'll be similar to knowing about a smartphone, that you need experts in lots of different fields to pull it all together to explain why something like force of will or divination, why it actually works.
Right. Yeah, I'm hoping for that too. The one thing that I think Because we talk about astral travel on here, right? And magicians since time of old have called that so many different things. Even in the Bible, you hear or you read where it says, I was in the spirit on the Lord's day, or whether I was in the body or out of the body, I don't know. And so they've always been interrelated, except to me, it's just like, and I could be wrong about this, but religion tends to talk about magic, but it's okay if it's in their context. But it's not okay if it's something else. I'll give you an example, like how the Hebrews would cast lots, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that's divination. But it wasn't okay to use divination with stones or go talk to someone else, but casting lots was okay. And I get in this trouble sometimes on this show because I don't want to offend any religion, because I actually believe a lot of these religions are beautiful and they actually have doorways into these mysteries. But I'm wondering if we're ever going to get past that point, you know? Can we get past the doorways? I wouldn't even say doorways, but the walls of religious ideas that keep us from being able to entertain these subjects?
Well, that's a difficult question. Each religion essentially is a cosmology. That means a theory that explains the nature of reality, and our place in it. That's what all religions are about. And this comes about for natural reasons. We all humans, going back to the very first human probably, when they had 5 minutes in which to spare where they could look up into the sky and figure out what in the world is going on here. Like, what is life and death? Why am I here at all? What are those points of light in the sky? All of that would lead to a story, right? Somebody comes up with a story about, well, this is the explanation. In olden times, it would be mythologies, the Olympian gods, and so on. And people believed all of that because they didn't have any other thing to believe in. There was no other way of understanding anything. So as science came along, science is also a cosmology. It's one that is more accurate in many ways, because these are now things that are so accurate we can make technologies about them. But religions ultimately are stories that help us try to understand who and what we are, give some moral direction, and so on. You're absolutely right that religion and magic go hand in hand.
Yeah.
That's why in the book I'm mentioning that religion is thought of as a theory. It's like a theory of existence. The magic part is the practice. It's putting into practice. It's like a technology based on the theory. So just as science is a bunch of theories, technology is the application of those theories. Magic is the application of religion. So you mentioned one example where religion accepts magic. Another is in Catholicism, the whole ceremony of the Eucharist, which is a very important part of Catholicism. That's very explicitly a magical practice, transmutation of one substance into another. But only priests are allowed to do that. If somebody else does exactly the same thing but is not a priest, it's heretical.
Right.
So you look in history and you find, well, why is our magic okay and their magic is not okay? It's completely about social control. So the Catholic Church, for 1,000 years, kept control, social control, and political and military control even, by declaring what was acceptable within the bounds of the church and what was not acceptable. So what became not acceptable is what we today call the esoteric traditions. It was anything that was not within the bounds of the church. So one of these days, I'm going to try to get invited to go into the Vatican archives, into their library. They have a massive library that includes all of this history in great detail. I'd like to see that because I know that the church from the very beginning was collecting manuscripts and books and everything that they could find on the esoteric traditions. They held it all. They weren't talking about it, but it's there in their archives.
Right.
So the notion then of whether we can get beyond religion, that's a really tough one. I don't know that we can. I mean, as humans, we live on meaning as much as we live on food. If you have a person who feels that their life has no meaning at all, there's no purpose, there's no meaning, they become extremely depressed. Mm-hmm. People commit suicide if they think there's no meaning in anything. So we need meaning. We need some kind of story that tells us what is our place in the world. And religion fills a void that for some people, science is just not good enough. It doesn't fill the story in the way that they want to hear.
Right, but it also does, and another thing I've tried to express is, I've even had people say that I was anti-Christian, and I'm far from that, actually. I just think that I understand a little bit, and maybe it's just my point of view of maybe when Christ was talking about the mysteries in those stories, I think the mystery is far greater than what our preachers had told us. I mean, even in the Gospel of Thomas, when Thomas was the guy, he had to know everything, see it, touch it, I don't believe it till I see it type guy. Yep. And was pulled to the side and was told something really special. And when they asked him, hey, what did Jesus tell you? And he said, I can't tell you. If I told you, you'd stone me to death. Doesn't it make you wonder what he did tell him?
Yeah. Well, among other things, that's what the Gnostic Gospels are about, right? The Bible, as we see it today, is pulled together by lots of people, right? Some people imagine it is the Word of God literally, and that's it. But when you look at it from a historical perspective, it's little books that were pulled together and then decided upon that this is going to be the received book. But things were left out. So when the Gnostic Gospels were discovered and as part of the Dead Sea Scrolls and lots of other pieces of religious lore, it tells quite a different story, or at least it expands upon the story. So you begin to learn a little bit about what Doubting Thomas was all about in ways that are not the way that they're usually taught. And this is not just from the major religions around the world. There's the esoteric literature is vast. I mean, we're talking about millions of documents, millions of books that tell a much deeper story that spans through history that every culture has shaped in their own way. And today, too, in some respects, science, while it's very powerful because it allows us to build technologies that are pretty good, science, for some people, becomes a kind of religion. It's called scientism, where people imagine that science is the only way that can be used to understand reality. And the mistake in that is that there are many ways of understanding reality. And if you take science as we know it today, well, that's going to change. We know in 20 years, all of our textbooks will have new stuff in them. So to hitch your wagon to what we know today as the final arbiter of truth, that's simply a mistake.
Right.
And so that, going back to your question, and what do we do about many religions, about our stories? I don't know. I just hope that as a species we're smart enough that we don't destroy ourselves in the name of religion. Because there's a long history of that.
Yeah, there's a movie that I recommend anybody watching called Agora. It's about the philosopher Hypatia and what happened to, I guess, at the end of the Library of Alexandria when it was pretty much just torn apart. And it wasn't just Christians. I mean, it was kind of like they're showing you in that movie when religion took over. People used to think and they used to wonder and question and get into groups and look at the sky and ponder and use logic to come in. And I would give anything to be able to go back to that and that be okay, and I'm sure it is in science, and scientists do this stuff all the time, but I wish it was okay on a spiritual level. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It requires a person who is open-minded, who is tolerant, who's not afraid, in order to go to that place. It is true, though, if you look back in Plato's Republic, so this is now over 2,000 years ago, and Plato's Republic, this is, of course, a Greek philosopher, he's talking about, among other things, the nature of the republic, the nature of government. And he traces the modern view of government almost exactly. It's almost shocking when you read the Republic and you read about how democracy works and what happens to democracy when you have an authoritarian person in charge, and how the oligarchy occurs, and there are these cycles that happen in government. It's like we can see history playing out in front of our eyes on television today. And this was written about 2,000 years ago. So many aspects of what it's like to be a human have changed over time, but a lot of them are still exactly the same. We're still the same species. And so what I hope is that we are now Homo sapiens, certain kind of primate species. I hope we become smart enough to evolve into Homo superior, or some other name, a more advanced form of primate that is not quite as aggressive, because it's our aggressiveness that has both gotten us to where we are. We're like the number one creature on the planet, but that same aggressiveness is putting the entire world at danger. So we need to evolve beyond what amounts to an adolescent phase and be able to be tolerant and be able to think carefully about topics without letting our emotions get in the way.
I totally agree. I talked to last night with Thomas Campbell, and I was like, hey, this guy's out. He's going to prove it through these experiments he raised all this money for. And he corrected me. He said, I'm not here to prove it. I'm here to bring evidence to the table. And the more evidence I can bring, the better off we're going to be. And I believe in that, too. It's just, I think when we approach it from a standoffish point of view, like I do, because it's like a standoff. I want to prove this stuff. Mm-hmm. But do you think this was meant to be an individual journey? That it wasn't meant to be made for the masses?
Well, that is part of the history of the esoteric traditions. That made for implies that there's a purpose or there's an underlying meaning, and we don't know if that's the case or not. It always seems as that at any point in history, there's a very small percentage of people, maybe a couple of percent, that have both the personality type and the predilection and the luxury of time and to think about these things, to think beyond where we currently are. I mean, obviously, if you're a person who is struggling to eat and survive, they can't think about things like epistemology and philosophy and so on. They just don't have the time to do that. But a small percentage of people have always had that time, and also they tend to be somewhat more creative than others, and they keep pushing. We see that today. They push in music, and they push in science, and push in literature. There's somebody always pushing us ahead. That's where all of the new ideas come from. That's what's kind of drawing us into the future. So from that perspective, maybe the majority of people don't have time or interest in dealing with this, right? So a relatively small percentage of people will be interested enough to want to read a book, to take a workshop, to do something. That's always relatively small percentage, maybe 10% of the population. And the rest of everybody else doesn't have time or doesn't have the interest. And that's fine. I mean, I think it's probably always been that way.
It's always been a worry of mine because like I said, I told you I was raised Christian, so there's always that fear in the back of my mind that maybe I shouldn't be talking about these things. And I know that's a psychological baggage type thing, but it gets tested so many times. I had a listener ask me, hey, on Twitter, message me, I love your show. This magic has helped me get over depression and addiction. Can you give me like some beginning rituals to start with? And I'm nobody to tell anybody that. I feel like there has to be at some point to discover it on your own. I think that's part of the magic, is discovering this on your own. Or should I tell him what to do? See, that's where I get confused, because I worry about that.
Well, so by analogy, you can say you know how to operate a gun, but that doesn't mean if a baby asks you to use the gun that you're going to give it to them.
Right.
In other words, magic is a kind of power. It's a power of knowing what's beyond the present and of manipulating reality, but that's a pretty big power. So you first of all need a certain degree of wisdom to know if somebody is mature enough to use the power. The thing is that in the old days, meaning way before books, the only way you could actually find out how to use magic was through oral traditions. But today, you go on the internet and you have access to the entire esoteric library. I mean, there's this online library based in the Netherlands that has thousands of books that are grimoires, like the ancient magical books. And you can go to Amazon.com and buy a bunch of them. So this is not secret anymore. Anybody who actually wants to know what to do, you can find lots and lots of material. It's usually better in any kind of practice to have a coach who knows what they're doing, somebody that you figure knows more than you do and you can trust them. They can train you quicker than a book. But there's an awful lot of online workshops and places you can go, and there's tons of material available. So if somebody asks me, and they do a lot now, they say, how can I use magic to do this and that?
Right.
What I usually do is point them to a couple of companies that have been around for a long time that have a good track record. Say, well, go to them. I'm not a trainer, but those people seem to know what they're doing. Or read these books, or take this online course. So there's plenty of material. It's up to them how they want to use it. And I think, like you, I don't feel comfortable saying, do this spell, make this sigil, do this thing. I have a chapter in the book, as you know, that talks a little bit about elementary magical practice, but I have it in there more as an illustration of what we're talking about in terms of a magical practice, rather than trying to be an instruction manual.
Yeah, I just I do find it a little worrisome sometimes. That's all. Because when you look at the initiatic systems, even back in the day, they had to. Some people didn't even make it to the next level because they had so much they had to work out themselves. And I talked to Gordon White about this. Some of the older systems, they want you to go through what's called the elemental grades, where you really have to deal with, your psychological nature, your emotions. Right. It's almost like they're you can't just start doing this stuff. You got to be ready to do it. And I still feel, some disagree with me, but I feel that that's important. And I don't want to be the guy that takes that stand and says, you must do this stuff before you practice magic. But if it's as powerful as you say it is that important? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think it is important. Like you look in the Eastern traditions, especially yoga and meditation, if you're taking a course on classical yoga, you have 8 different steps along the way up till the point where you can do magical things. And the first 5 of those steps are all about how to live well, how to get your body strong and clean, and to get your mind strong and clean, and all of that. This is all like simply how do you live to be a strong, ethical person, get your ego in check. And then after that, which might take years, well, then you start meditation, then you start yoga, then you do the practices which are all about getting your mind to the point where you can reach this Gnostic state, which is where magic happens. So by the same token, if you have a teenager and they take a strong psychedelic, they can get shot like a rocket right to a Gnostic state, but it can drive them to become psychotic. Right. They're not prepared for it. And that is a danger with somebody getting thrust into that realm without being prepared.
Makes sense to me. And before we talk about some of the evidence and stuff, there's this thing that's always been on my mind. Robert Monroe first brought it to my attention in his book Journeys Out of the Body, or his series Journeys Out of the Body. When these things just happened to him, he wasn't practicing magic, but magic was happening to him.
Right.
He did question at the end of one of his books, if I can do this, and this just happened to me, who else can do this? Does the government know about this? Are they trotting around in our dreams? Is there something, and I don't want to get too conspiratorial or dark here, but, if these things are real, then a control mechanism could be put in place. I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, potentially. But you see, in the cases of people who become known for this sort of thing, like Robert Monroe or Edgar Cayce, those kinds of people, they are already starting from a level of very high natural talent. Mm. And so they may need to do nothing. They sit down one day, have a daydream, and they find that they're out of their body on Pluto or something. So they didn't do anything other than some people are natural athletes, right? Somebody may not have ever run a race, and they try it for the first time and they win because they have a special talent. Same is true for music, same is true for science or any other thing. So somebody happens to have a natural talent to get into a Gnostic mental state. they can do all kinds of interesting things very quickly with very, very little practice or even no practice. For the average person, to imagine that they're going to go out and they're going to run every day and then they'll make it to the Olympics, sorry, but that's not going to happen. Some people simply don't have enough talent to be able to achieve what others can do easily. And we would like to say that everybody can achieve anything that they want, but it's simply not the case.
Yeah. There's only two ways to do it, natural talent or really working your rear off to get there. I see what you're saying.
Well, you actually need both.
Yeah.
You need to work like crazy to get into the Olympics, but you also have to have the talent. And so some people simply don't. But that said, it doesn't mean that everybody can't get better. So if somebody's watching tennis, they're watching tennis games, that's what they like to do all the time. And then they go out in the court and they try to play tennis, they're not going to be very good at it. If they get a tennis coach who keeps giving them tips, do this thing and now hit the ball this way, they'll get a lot better, but they'll still never become a professional tennis player. And the same is true here. People can get much, much better at magical practices, a lot better than if they didn't know anything. But that doesn't mean they're going to end up being Merlin the magician. They'll just be better than what they started at.
Yeah, I guess, from what my question is kind of more of, it's obvious the government's studied this stuff. There's too much evidence that kind of points, it doesn't really prove, but points to it, and there is a little bit that proves it, but points to they did study these things. For what reasons, and we've talked about conspiracy on here before. I'm not a really big conspiracy guy. I'm sorry. A lot of people wish I was, but I'm not. But, he did ask that question, and I remember he tried to astral travel to, I don't know if it was the governor's mansion. It was either the governor's or the president's mansion, I forget. But there were two guys out there, if I remember right, and guards, and it was the president, or the governor's not here. He's not available. And it just made him think, well, maybe there's other people doing this. Even in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which I think is channeled material, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering, he talks about that. There's these things that go in through our dreams in that realm, and they try to do things and control us. And it's kind of scary thinking about it. It may not be true, but I don't know.
Well, so I know about U.S. government work in this area, and a little bit about the Russians as well. Maybe I should save it until after the break, though.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. So in terms of the control element, this is one of the reasons why this topic is taboo. It's fearful, and realistically so. It's not like you can be paranoid for no reason, but here you do have a reason to be paranoid.
Yeah.
Because some people are very talented. The control issue is probably not anywhere near as we see in the movies. Again, we have to pull back from that level. But is it possible that psychics can be used for espionage, for example? And the answer is yes. That's not exactly the same as controlling somebody's behavior, but of being able to do surveillance and espionage, yeah, that's possible.
Right. Yeah, that's what I wanted to get at. We can talk a little bit more about that when we come back from the break. I'm here with Dr. Dean Radin, author of Real Magic. Stick around right after these words. We'll be right back.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass, because you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Shifthead.
How you doing today, guys? This is Garrett Lee.
And this is Randy Warner.
We're the hosts of Healers and Hellraisers, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Live for 3 hours every Saturday night. It's a show that engages the mind, makes you think, and maybe even challenge what you think you know. Hi, I'm Jeremy Scott of Into the Paranormal, where we talk about topics that are anything but mainstream, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. Bring an open mind and join us for Into the Parabnormal, live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Fringe FM.
From birth, we have been conditioned to conform to what is normal, conditioned to adhere to authority, and conditioned to repeat what has been told to us as truth. I'm Ryan Gable, and here at the Secret Teachings Radio, I've interviewed hundreds of great guests and done extensive unique research into subjects that span from the paranormal and the occult to health, philosophy, and history. I personally have no affiliations or agenda, except to use objective critical thinking in my analysis of every subject discussed, to empower myself with information and hopefully allow you to do the same. If you want to join me, tune into the Secret Teachings radio broadcast, airing live Monday through Friday from midnight to 3 a.m. U.S. Pacific Standard Time on the Fringe FM. For more information, you can visit our website at www.thesecretteachings.info or email me at rdgable@yahoo.com.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Want to know what's on the Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm. Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We're live on KTLK Digital Broadcast in the Fringe FM. And don't forget, we are here every night, Monday night through Thursday night, 9 p.m. Pacific time, live for you. And we'll be here next week. And after the show, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable will be on the Fringe FM as well. And make sure that you guys send your donations in and do everything you can to help us out. We'd really appreciate it. We're here with
with the notion of what is the mind capable of doing, not with drugs or not with special techniques, but what is it just naturally able to do? And in particular, if you find people who are natural psychics, especially clairvoyants, the people who can perceive through space and time, are they useful for something?
Right. Yeah,
So,
I just got to say real quick, we lost the stream for some reason. I don't know what that was, but yeah, we're just in case you're listening in, we're back here with Dr. Dean Radin, and we were talking about government projects that could involve magic, and that it's not one thing that you did say to me. You said during the break was, we got to watch out about movies, and I hate for you to have to repeat what you just said, but the stream just went down. I don't know why, but we're back on. I apologize about that, Dr. Radin.
Well, unfortunately, it's only going to amplify people's concerns about conspiracies.
What we're talking about.
Yeah, I mentioned the word MK Ultra, and suddenly the stream goes down. Okay, so MK Ultra was a CIA program that was using psychedelics and hypnosis and other means to try to control people's behavior. And that was a real program, and finally it was discovered, and it came to light, and it was completely shut down. We don't do that anymore. There are all kinds of controls in place now when you do experiments involving humans that prevent that from happening. But people assume that MK Ultra and psychic phenomena are the same, and they're completely different. So I know this because I was recruited for the program doing the psychic research for the government, and I spent a year as a visiting scientist on that program. And was very clear about it was it had nothing to do with controlling anybody. It had completely to do with, could you use really talented psychics for something useful for the government? The answer is yes. They could be used for espionage. So the idea here is that, when you look at how espionage is done, a lot of it is through things like satellites, photographic satellites, which are very, very good. But satellites can't tell you what's happening on the ground very well. So you also have human intelligence, which are people on the ground that find things. But even then, the human intelligence on the ground and the satellites can see a picture of a building, but you're not exactly sure what's happening inside the building, and you can't get anybody in there. So here's where a psychic might come in handy, because a psychic can cast their mind anywhere in space or time, including inside the building. So there are many missions like that, both look inside this thing that we don't know what's going on in there, or tell us what's going to happen 9 months from now. Like, there's something about that building we think is suspicious. Can you look in the future and tell us what's going to happen? Well, both of those are possible. Really talented psychics can do that. I saw many examples of that. Most of it is declassified now. So there are a lot of books out there, and you can just go on the CIA website and look up extrasensory perception. You can find almost all of it online. And it gives the whole history of this. So when I was there, the director of the program was Edwin May, physicist, and he's now published, or beginning to publish, a series of 4 books called the Stargate Archives. Stargate was one of the code words. Okay. So the Stargate Archives is almost the complete list of documents and history about what the government was actually doing for psychic espionage. So it's all above board. The only parts which remain classified are specific missions, specific people involved, that sort of thing. But almost all of the research, almost all of the operations, it's all there now. It's all printed. So it's another example of what used to be top secret is now in the public domain.
Yeah, they're making a new series on the History Channel about Project Blue Book, and it looks to me like when you said, well, we got to be careful about the movies, because we tend to do cinematic things in our mind and make that real when we watch a movie. But this new series about Blue Book looks pretty cool, but I think you're right. I think even after the series is over, and I don't know what it's going to do, we probably still need to go back and look at all the facts. But from an early age, this is something else we've discussed on this show, is when we were children, Dean, that we had these capabilities. It seems like everybody I talked to would see things that weren't there. They would actually astral travel when they were kids. They just really couldn't control it. And all of these crazy things that we now discuss on late night radio as adults that are kind of fringy, I guess, but you did say that it's moving out of the fringe, but all of these things we discuss happens to us when we were kids. So something happened along the way that stopped everything. So I wonder if we weren't all just naturally born with this capability and our own junk just made it stop.
Well, part of it is just the developmental stages that children go through. A colleague of mine did a series of tests with children aged 3 to 18, gave the same number of children the same test from age 3 to 18, and found that the peak performance was at age 4, across the board, boys and girls.
Makes sense.
And so age 4, from a child development perspective, is when they're still pretty much infantile in terms of the way they think about things, and they're not well socialized, but they also are starting to get a pretty good vocabulary. So they're able to report what their experience is, and they haven't been socialized out of talking about it, because they don't know yet what you can talk about and what you shouldn't. That's why kids sometimes are perceived as being very blunt. They'll just say whatever comes to mind.
Right.
So for adults who retain that kind of childlike ability to not censor their thoughts, those typically are the ones who turn out to be really good psychics. Most people learn very quickly to not say what's going on inside their head. That's what happens when you start socializing with other people. You know, the person who's called weird because they're telling you things that they shouldn't know, that kid learns really quickly, you just shut up. And so it happens early on. Most people, by the time they become maybe 12 or 14 years old, they never talk about this stuff again. It's only the rare family that allows people to talk about this. It's somewhat unusual that they will allow kids to talk about it. And typically these are families where the parents or the grandmother or somebody else has always been psychic. So you could talk about it in the family, but even then they say, don't talk about this to other people. So it sustains the taboo, essentially, because you're right. Most kids around age 4, plus or minus a little bit, they're having all kinds of strange experiences. And those are roughly the same as what adults will report, but the adults now are called psychics.
Well, even when I was a child, I wasn't allowed to watch bad movies or things that would scare me and stuff like that. But I remember specifically things that happened that were terrifying. And it always seemed to me, and there's a lot of stories. I've talked to a lot of people now about their childhood stuff. And it seems like there was this just benevolent thing that was going around just trying to freak kids out. And I don't know if what I'm trying to get at is it's a morality thing. Are there really demons and bad things on the other side in this realm? You know, obviously you probably don't have evidence of it, but I'm just curious about your opinion on it.
I think a lot of it is stories that are used to control our behavior. You know, if you don't act well, then somewhere between Santa Claus not giving you a prize and the boogeyman will get you. That's a way to keep kids under control. On the other hand, if you're 4 years old, you're psychically wide open, and you will begin to perceive the emotions of other people. And there's a lot of pain out there, in which case you become psychically open, especially as you're falling asleep or something. You could freak yourself out really fast because now you're picking up the pain of adults, emotional pain, horrible things that are happening. They're not happening in your house, but maybe it's in the neighbors next door or down the street or on the other side of the world. So there's a lot of suffering. And that suffering, for somebody who's psychically open, you can feel it. And so it's not surprising that people shut it down because it's too painful. So I think a lot of what we think of as the demons and the things out there that want to get you, it's conceivable that, yes, there are invisible entities out there of some type, but I think most of it is more easily understood as there's simply a lot of suffering that's happening in the world, both humans and non-humans. And if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, in order to survive as a separate organism, you have to shut it off. If you don't shut it off, you're driven crazy. And so maybe some people that we call schizophrenic, who are suffering a lot because they're just too open. They don't know how to shut it down. So they feel like they're constantly being attacked because it's not them. It's not attacking them. They're just feeling all the pain of the world. which, as you can imagine, it's a horrible state to be in.
Yeah, that's what kind of scares me about it, actually. I've had a friend of mine that kind of happened to, who at first was very talented and gifted in this. And, I'm not going to use her name for obvious reasons, but very gifted, practiced Reiki and is just wide open. And then all of a sudden, their family starts calling me and telling me that they're in the hospital. And then, it's, I was like, what's going on? And immediately they're looking for somebody to blame, and so they think that I'm to blame because I talk about it on my show. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't want to get into too much details, but it was just a really good-hearted person who I still believe is a really good-hearted person, but they're afraid to talk to me or even listen to the show because of what happened. Right. And that's what it's always been in the back of my mind, because when I talk about these subjects, part of me thinks all of you guys that are hurting out there that want to empower your life and want to have better lives and increase your consciousness and awareness, this will help you. And at the same time, I feel like I might be putting certain people in danger, if that makes any sense.
Yes. If you talk to meditation teachers, and these are people who will hold workshops. You might have 20 people at a workshop, and they just do this again and again. So they've taught thousands of people how to meditate. They will say, maybe privately after a couple of beers, they will say that roughly somewhere between 2 and 5% of people who are learning how to meditate will become psychotic. So meditation is about the most gentle way that we know to train people's minds. It's a slow process. It's not dangerous, but a small percentage of people, when beginning to dive into your unconscious, it triggers trauma, it triggers all kinds of things, opens your mind to a larger reality. Some people simply can't take it. They're literally driven to be psychotic. So these kinds of ideas, these kinds of practices really are not for everyone. Mm-hmm. Most people, we're talking about over 90% of the people are probably fine, or maybe 85%, but some small percentage simply are not appropriate. And it's difficult to know in advance who those people are. That's one of the dangers.
But I think that this goes back to my point about, lodges and schools and mystery schools when they had instructors.
Yes.
And you can look at it, I guess, if you want to look at it from a Harry Potter point of view, but it's not really that. It was maybe this philosopher understood it and could handle it more, and he would look at his students or pupils, if you want to go back to Aristotle, and those guys and say, this guy's not ready. He's not ready. And we don't have that. We do, but I just don't. I think we need to have that more, and there's a lot of people who disagree with me that everybody should just attack this from an individual thing and just kind of be open about it, and I tend to think that it needs to be approached very slowly and carefully.
I agree with you. In the old days, there were mystery schools, which were specifically designed to teach people about opening their consciousness, and part of the mystery school was meditation and exercises and some psychedelics, but at each stage along the way, you had experts who were constantly watching and training and talking to each individual. This happens in meditation retreats too, that a good instructor will spend a lot of time with each individual to find out what's going on in their head. And that's really important to keep people stable, because if they become unstable, then they start to freak out, and that's not good for anybody. So it's true that a lot of people are simply risk takers. They're the kinds who will have never gone mountain climbing, just free climb the first time. Mm-hmm. Well, some of them will be all right, but a lot of them are going to end up getting seriously injured. And the same is true here. It's better to learn slowly in a safe way than it is to tackle it head on, because a lot of people are not ready for it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people out there hurting. You probably know more than anybody. And even in this field, I've got friends that say, yeah, I practice magic all the time, and they talk about crystals and all this good stuff. But yet, they're depressed, they're hurting, or they have some type of psychological issue. And I'm thinking, well, practical psychology did take a role in this. It really did. You could even open up a few Israel Regardie books about the Golden Dawn, which I bring up a lot here. I know, but they did recommend that. Look, if you're going to start this, they highly recommend, and even some schools kind of forced you to, have a therapist,
right,
and do this slowly. And I don't know. To me, I was attracted to that because I wanted to be careful. And
that's well said. No, I completely agree that anytime. It really goes for almost anything you can think of. I mean, everything has the potential for good or bad. Some people just don't have access to a place to be trained, or they don't have the money, or they don't have the time or something, and they just dive into a grimoire and start doing it. Teenagers like to do that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
For some of them, again, a small percentage, maybe 5%, will just play with a Ouija board and become psychotic. Well, that's not good. Most people, it's fine. A lot of it's the cases where somebody goes off the deep end that attracts a lot of attention. And as a reminder that we're talking about something here which is a power. And as I don't remember if I said it in Real Magic or not, one of the other books, we're talking about a power which is far more powerful than nuclear energy. We're talking about the energy of the universe, basically, which has to do with your consciousness. So it deserves respect.
Right. I know you did bring up in your book, one of the first things you said in there was, and I don't know if it relates to the same subject matter, but you said magic is very real and powerful, but at the same time, it can be quite frightening. And I might have interpreted that wrong, but is that what you meant by that?
Yes. The frightening part is partially that any kind of power can be dangerous. It can be used for all sorts of really good things, personally and collectively, but it's also dangerous, like any power. It's like a bomb, right? I mean, nuclear power can be used for all kinds of really good things, and it could be made into a bomb too. So the power itself is neutral. It's how you use it that becomes both a moral question and one of wisdom too. And magic, I think, as I said, it's way more powerful than nuclear energy.
In the book, I wanted to talk about some of the evidence that's there, because I know that's a pretty extensive part of the book where you talk about evidence. Could you give us just a couple examples that kind of open our eyes to the reality of magic as far as any evidence goes?
Well, so take something that most people will recognize as something like telephone telepathy. So telephone telepathy refers to you hear the phone ring, you haven't seen the caller ID yet, but you just know who's on the other end of the line. Or even better, you think of somebody and the phone rings even before, as you're reaching for the phone. The person calling you, that's the one that you had in mind. Or even more than that, you for reasons you don't understand, like a schoolmate or somebody you hadn't talked to in 20 years, they just come to mind for some reason. And then you get an email from them, or a text, or even a phone call. So these are cases of what seems to be a mind-to-mind connection. So that we call it telepathy.
Oh, yeah.
So in the laboratory, a lot of people report a couple of cases like that they can remember. So for some people, it happens all the time. So in the laboratory, what you want to test is that a real thing? Is it coincidence? Some cases, it probably is coincidence. But could it be real? Could one mind somehow get information about another mind? So the classic experiment that is used to test this involves a person who will send information and a person who will receive information. You isolate them so there's no normal way that they can communicate. You give the sending person, beforehand you prepare a series of 4 photographs. These are all different from each other as much as possible. So it might be a picture of a forest and a picture of an ocean and a picture of a bunny and a picture of a pine cone, something like that, all quite different from each other. And now you randomly choose one of those 4 pictures. Of course, nobody in the experiment beforehand knew what the pictures were, especially the sender and receiver. So you pick one of the pictures. You give that to the sender. You tell the sender to mentally send this image or the content of this image to the person, to the receiver, who's isolated at a distance somewhere. Meanwhile, the person who is isolated is asked to speak aloud anything that comes to their mind, and they're in a relaxed condition. And anything they say is recorded aloud to remind them later what they said. And so they get into a dreamy state and they just start speaking aloud anything that comes to mind. So that goes on for about 20 minutes. After the 20 minutes, the receiver is told, okay, now stop. We're going to show you 4 pictures, one of which the sender was trying to mentally send to you, along with 3 decoys. Of course, we're not going to tell you which is which. You have to guess based on your experience, which you can hear by playing back an audio recording of everything you've said. Play back and see if one of your impressions, your mental impressions, matched what the sender was sending. So by chance, the receiver would choose the correct target 1 in 4 times. If they have no information about it, they can just guess at random, and they would choose the correct target 1 in 4 times. So the hit rate in this experiment is 25% by chance.
Okay.
And so there's been roughly 5,000 sessions of the type where I described as just one session, where you choose 1 of 4 targets. So with 5,000 sessions like that, and over a period of about 40 years and 20 different laboratories around the world, the overall hit rate, and these are with people who are not claiming that they're telepathic. They're just usually college sophomores who were grabbed and say, do you want to do an experiment? We'll give you credit to do this. And they say yes. So these are just average people. The overall hit rate is 32%.
Wow.
So 32% is only 7% over chance. But because you have 5,000 data points, you can calculate the probability of getting 32% when 25% is chance. And the answer, in terms of odds against chance, is over a quadrillion to 1. That's 1,000,000 trillion to 1.
Pretty significant. Yeah.
So up until 2005, what skeptics would generally say is, well, maybe the process of choosing the random target wasn't really random. Well, that was checked. And maybe there was a way that they could communicate with each other. No, that was checked. And maybe this and maybe that, a long list, about a dozen possible loopholes in the experiment. But they were all closed. They were closed because somebody would come up with an idea, well, maybe this. And so the next experiment would close that loophole. And this went on for many, many years. So the experiment that is the standard experiment now closes all known loopholes. But one remained. So the remaining loophole was, can a skeptic, somebody who doesn't believe this, get the same result? In 2005, some skeptics did the experiment, and they got exactly the same result as everybody else reported, 32%.
Wow. See, and I know Edgar Casey has some practices like that, too, and his remote viewing. Well, I've got some books by him that do that, about remote viewing practices, and you can actually increase your skills at it. And remember, you did say that these were, we got to take a break here, but you did say these were just average people, like, of no known talent. That's pretty significant, too. Guys, we got go ahead, say what you were going to say.
That tells us that this is a general human ability.
Right.
Whereas talented people do much, much better in this experiment.
Right. Pretty cool stuff. Real magic, guys. That's the book we're talking about. We'll be right back with Dr. Dean Radin. We got about 30 more minutes left with him. Stick around right after these words.
To Lighting the Void Radio.
This is Rev Dan Lopez from Spiritual Warrior Today Radio, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Ahoy there. here.
And I'm Cortana, and we're here to take you on a journey through all things paranormal, metaphysical, ufology, and even psychedelic on our show,
Shift Happens, live every Friday night from 7 to 9 Pacific. That's 9 to 11 Central, right here on the Fringe FM.
And remember, don't feed the Archons, feed ducks instead.
Duck up.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
If you have hard water, the lime scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate lime scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Hey folks, guess what the number one phrase that Life Change Tea receives by email? You ready? We love this tea. We love this tea. Time after time, week after week, we love this tea. Life Change Tea gives you more energy, a beautiful cleansing, and fulfills its slogan perfectly. The tea that makes you go. So if you want to be on your health game, log on to getthetea.com and order Life Change Super Strength Tea. Packages come in a 1-month supply, and when you brew this stuff, wait until you see the results. Aren't we all about the results? And with a lot of people's health struggling, we can use a little bit of help. Doctors will tell you disease starts in the gut. So log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Be our next email saying, I love this tea. I love this tea. Get the tea at getthetea.com. Helping America one tea bag at a time.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We're here with Dr. Dean Radin. And in the third hour, we're going to bring on the host, Michael Deacon, from the End of Days program, who also airs on the Fringe FM. But before the break, we were talking about, in his book, there were some subjects about real evidence, like evidence that magic is real. And I kind of wanted to stay with that, Dr. Radin, about evidence, because evidence is important. If we can show everybody that magic is a real thing, not prove it, like Thomas Campbell said, but just show enough evidence, then maybe more people will pay attention to it.
Right. So the longest chapter in Real Magic is about the scientific evidence. And all of that basically is looking at repeated experiments, classes of experiments that have been done over long periods of time in different laboratories that show that various forms of divination are real, various forms of force of will, and theurgy. There's evidence in all cases. So about a month after the book was published in April 2018, so the very next month in May, in a journal called American Psychologist, which is the flagship journal of the American Psychological Association. The APA, American Psychological Association, is the primary academic organization for psychologists in the United States. It's a very large organization, tens of thousands of psychologists, and both professors and students and clinicians all belong to this thing. It's also pretty conservative in terms of how they treat psychic phenomena. Because of the various academic disciplines, psychologists tend to be the most skeptical. If you look at almost every discipline outside of psychology, the level of acceptance is pretty similar to the general public. But within psychology, they're much more skeptical because psychologists learn lots of ways that we can fool ourselves. And so they imagine that psychic phenomena, which includes magic, is just people fooling themselves. But the article that was published in American Psychologist, which is the premier journal for the entire academic psychology system, is this lead article called, with the title, The Experimental Evidence for Parapsychological Phenomena, a review. This was written by a guy named Etzel Cardinha, who's a professor at Lund University, which is in Sweden. So what Etzel did was review 10 different classes of experiments in parapsychology, which studied these phenomena, which I've called magic. And he shows that these are repeated experiments over many, many years. And basically, all of the very classic types of psychic phenomena, we're talking about telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis, and some forms of survival of consciousness, all of them show highly significant repeatable effects. So this is really remarkable because this is talking to mainstream conservative psychology in a lead article in the main journal, and is coming out with a statement saying that basically this stuff is real. It's as real as anything else that we know in psychological testing.
Oh.
The other thing, which I do talk about in the book, is the opinion of the president of the American Statistical Association. And this is important because statistics is the area of science that evaluates data. These are mathematicians and statisticians who know how to deal with experimental results and how to interpret it and how to do it correctly. And the president of the American Statistical Association is basically the leader of all of the statisticians, tens of thousands of them. So she said in 2016, as part of her presidential address to the other statisticians, that there were about 6,000 at that conference. Among other things, she said that she had worked as a consultant for the U.S. government program on psychic spying, the same program that I was on, and that she evaluated the evidence for remote viewing, for precognition, and a few other phenomena, and they are as real as any other phenomenon that science has studied.
Wow.
So we now have mainstream psychology, mainstream statistics, both agreeing. Now this is mainstream journals and mainstream people agreeing that these phenomena are real. The phenomena I'm talking about are essentially the practice of magic. So,
and yet it's still taboo, though, right?
Well, but the taboo is beginning to show cracks, because in the old days, this would never rise up to the level of mainstream discourse. You wouldn't see this kind of thing in mainstream journals, at least not repeatedly in big journals. There have been some articles published in Science and Nature, which are the two top scientific journals in the world, but that was in the 1970s. And then it was a long period from the 70s up until recently where you never saw anything about these topics in the big journals. Now it's starting to come back. And so we go through cycles that are roughly 20 to 30 years long, cycles in politics and cycles in what's popular in science. We're on an upward trend now. And the upward trend, we're beginning to see more and more interest among scientists and academics in these kinds of phenomena. And that's one of the reasons why the book Real Magic, I could have gone out to my buddies who teach about personal development and spirituality and that sort of thing. They would have endorsed the book, but I decided to take a chance and see if I could get my scientific colleagues to endorse the book. And so I was very happy that 2 Nobel laureates, one in physics and one in chemistry, they publicly endorsed the book.
That's great.
And professors from many other disciplines, from people from the National Academy of Sciences, the National Science Foundation, and so on. So these are all top-tier people in science and academia who are saying, even for a book that's about magic, that they're willing to endorse it. And it's not so much that the evidence actually is better now than it was in the 1970s. It's a lot better. But it's more that the taboo is beginning to crack, and it's no longer dangerous. It's at least not as dangerous for mainstream scientists to begin to admit publicly that, yeah, there's something interesting going on.
Right.
And they don't need to say much more than that in order to start breaking the taboo.
I'm so glad to hear that. Hopefully, have they fixed the Wikipedia page? Then someone needs to submit that, put that in there if it's not in there yet.
Well, Wikipedia is a whole other matter.
Right, yeah.
Wikipedia is supposedly the encyclopedia that anyone could edit, which is simply
doesn't make it
not
a very good encyclopedia, if you ask me.
Well,
if anybody can edit it.
You get what you pay for when it's free. But worse than that, it actually cannot be edited by anybody. There are some pages that have lockdowns, and there are editors who are quite skeptical, and they lock down a page, and you try to change it, and they revert it back within minutes. So some pages, the skeptics who think that they know better than anybody else, they're basically writing a kind of imaginary history.
Yeah.
Or they're only writing negative things, and they're not writing the whole story about things. That's why I recommend that if people want to know what's really going on with Wikipedia, it has many, many good qualities in Wikipedia, but when it comes to controversial topics, I recommend that people go to a website called Wikipediocracy. Okay. Wikipediocracy.com tells the backstory of what's actually going on with Wikipedia. And it shows again and again that even topics that you wouldn't think are controversial, the pages that are written on Wikipedia are completely distorted to the point where it's like a story now. It's not what is actually real. It's like a story encyclopedia rather than an actual one.
Well, I've found that also, and this is just my opinion, that skepticism has become its own religion. I've seen them write articles and do things, and despite the facts, just because something was too wild to believe, even though there was evidence to substantiate it, even if circumstantial, whatever kind of evidence you want, it's there, and they still just want to fight it. And to me, when that happens, it becomes a cult-like mentality. And it's not bad to be skeptic. The word skeptic is a good thing, but
right.
It's almost like there's certain, I guess you could say, organizations out there trying to make a religion out of it. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's actually going backwards to do that.
I agree. So those skeptics are actually not true skeptics, as you said, because skeptical means being doubtful, but also open. So if you're doubtful without being open, then that's simply intolerant. That's not a proper way of trying to evaluate complex data.
Right.
And unfortunately, you see that on Wikipedia quite a bit.
Now, there is a subject here that I have to ask about because it's popping up in the chat room, and this whole concept of white and black magic. I was actually on another podcast where I talked about this, a Nicole Frolick's podcast that's releasing later this week. Do you believe that there are two sides of magic, that there is black and white magic? Before I ask the next question.
Well, yeah. So the what's white and what's black is, in my view, or at least my understanding of magic, that if you do magic that is intended to override somebody else's free will, that's black magic.
Okay. Easy enough, right?
Yeah, and almost anything else is white magic.
And the case of go ahead, I'm sorry.
So there's a subtlety here. So let's say somebody believes that they can heal somebody with magic. Like prayer is a form of magic. Prayer is an intentional influence. So somebody is ill, and you decide you want to pray for them to be better. If they don't know that you're praying for them, that's black magic.
Really?
Because you're attempting to do something to them, even though it's for beneficial reasons, but they don't give you permission to do it. They don't know that you're doing it. That is overriding their free will, and is black magic.
So if my grandmother is sick with cancer, and she doesn't know I'm praying for her healing, that's black magic?
That's a no-no.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if you take seriously the idea that the drawing the red line that separates white and black magic is overriding somebody else's free will, that means you can't do anything for them, even for their benefit, unless they know about it. They have to give permission for it.
So it would be more.
This is related, by the way. It's sort of vaguely related to the legend about the vampire. The vampire cannot come into your house unless you give permission. It's like it's the free will element is an extremely important aspect of how these kinds of phenomena seem to work.
This is a highly debatable conversation I've seen on many threads where people talk about this. Like, hey, if there was a cancer, wouldn't you get it out? Even if no one knew that you were doing it, and other people say what you say. Well, it's really not your decision to make, right?
Right. Right.
And I can see that too, because I can tell you, it's a long story and I won't go into it, but I can tell you of instances when I was a child that my grandmother and grandfather did a certain set of Hebrew prayers over me, just to get me away from all the bad stuff I was around. Yes, it got me away from that stuff, but the stuff that happened to get me away from it, I wouldn't wish on anybody. So yeah. I can see your point, actually.
Yeah. And so there's a gray area. The gray area are things like binding spells. So the binding spell is to prevent harm from coming to somebody else, right? So it's for a benefit of somebody, but in order to prevent someone from being harmed, it is overriding somebody else's, typically, not always, but typically it's preventing somebody else from doing something bad. So this is now a moral quandary, right? You're preventing somebody who's a bad person from doing something in order to save this other person. Well, is that black magic or not? Well, it's neither. It's in the gray zone, and because there is a gray zone, then that's where the debates come from. It's very similar to the idea of somebody has a bad illness and you want to help them, but if you don't have their permission, is that okay? Well, it's kind of a gray zone, and it's either darker gray or lighter gray, depending on how you see it.
Yeah, Will is wanting to know, do you have any recommendations? And here comes the questions we were talking about earlier. How do you recommend this, right? Do you have any recommendations of protection against black magic?
Yeah.
That's a tough one, because I don't, when people ask me that, I'm thinking, what do you normally do, Right.
So the usual response that you would get from a magician is to come up with a ritual that you believe that will protect you from that. Typically, imagine a shield of white light around yourself, or a mirror, or something like that. That's what you find again and again in most of the books about this. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of famous books. One is called Psychic Self-Defense.
Yeah, Dion Fortune. That's a good one.
Dion Fortune. So that was written in the 1920s, I think. What she says in there is pretty much what I just said. You develop a ritual that you imagine that you are protected, and you have to believe that you are protected, and that's sufficient. Otherwise, you find somebody that you trust, who apparently has a handle on knowing what to do, and you ask for their assistance. And of course, that's fraught with all kinds of problems, because a lot of people who represent themselves as being psychics or magicians are frauds.
Yeah,
and so
that's for sure.
You have to rely on word of mouth and good reputations and all the rest in order to decide whether you want to go with that person or not.
Well, I can say one thing that I am glad, another reason I'm glad that this book is out, and I really haven't said this before, but magic is being, it's being sold kind of like the alien thing is being sold. You know how movies sell things and then there's a reality to it, right? So it's being marketed in a certain way right now by certain people, and I don't totally agree with it. When I see your book come out, I look at all your other books, and they're about, the reality of consciousness, entangled minds, the conscious universe. And then you release a book about magic, this is about power. This is kind of about how to manipulate this system. And after reading it, I got to say, man, it is really set apart from everything else that's come out today. It's kind of like Gordon's work. It's the real deal, tells you the real history, tells you the real evidence. And I just, I'm not trying to blow smoke, but I'm very, very happy that this book is out. I'm glad that it's here.
Well, thank you. That's very nice. You'll notice that one of the things I don't spend much time on in this book, which you do find in most books on magic, are things like protection spells and practice of magic. How do you use this stuff? Because I figured that, first of all, I'm writing this for scientists and academics as well as lay people. I figured it's important to provide a baseline, a scholarly baseline, even though it's written in a non-scholarly way, to show that, first of all, we're dealing with something which is real. From a scientific perspective, this is extremely radical. Scientists don't like the idea that magic might be real because it screws up the whole scientific process.
Right.
Nevertheless, it is a real thing. That's already super radical. Once you get past that, then all of these really interesting questions come along, like how do you explain it? How do you use it? What are the dangers? All of those things. Well, that's going to be another book. I just wanted in this book to simply lay out we are dealing with something which is quite real, and this is why. So that's what that book is about.
Yeah, it's perfect for that, too. That's exactly what it's about. I'm probably going to read it 2 or 3 times. I honestly think that it's going to help me kind of maybe argue with the skeptics a little bit. And I know that's not why you wrote it. I can definitely tell that's not why you wrote it. But I've always struggled with the words to describe the history of it when it comes to the mystery schools, Gnosticism. I've struggled with talking about evidence, and you really just made it clear in this book. And I hope that my audience will take the time out to grab it. You can even get it through Audible. It's a bestseller in its class, not its class, but its genre right now on Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and the audiobook is doing particularly well.
Yeah, that's the book I got. We just got a couple of minutes here left. Do you have anything coming up that you would like to talk about? Do you have any conferences or speaking events? Are you working on any other books, or just anything else you'd like to share with us? By all means, plug away.
Well, I can just mention that last month I was traveling in Germany and Italy at conferences. The one in Germany was particularly interesting because it was sponsored by the pharmaceutical company Merck. So Merck is a really big company. I forget how much the profit is in the tens of billions of euros. So they're a big company. They do pharmaceuticals and materials and some life science products. And they had this big international conference. It had 5 Nobel laureates and 30 other top-tier scientists from around the world talking about innovation in science. And so I was one of the invited speakers. And when they invited me, I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? because I don't know anything about the pharmaceutical business. And they said, well, we like your book about magic. And I said, really?
Wow.
Yeah. And the reason was that the Merck company, which is not the one in the U.S., there's a company with a similar name, but the German company, Merck, they had this conference to celebrate their 350th anniversary. Very few companies last that long. And the reason they do is because they take innovation very seriously. And in order to continually be innovative in a business, you have to maintain curiosity. Mm-hmm. So they wanted a topic that they knew everybody would find curious, but also had a scientific basis. So I talked about magic, the evidence for magic, which, of course, everybody was fascinated with, because who wouldn't be? And very few people know the actual evidence, the scientific evidence for magic. So I went through that, and they all found it fabulously interesting. So this doesn't happen very often in the United States.
No, I don't think it would. No, that's really cool.
So most of the talks that I've given for large companies, for governments, for business, have been outside the United States. So the taboo is much stronger here than it is almost anywhere else in the world.
That's impressive, though. That lets you know that just everybody's curious about it. I think it's I think it's very cool. I think that's progress, if you ask me, as far as the awareness of it. And I do, like I said, I want to thank you for spending this time with us on Lighting the Void. I can't wait till your next book comes out. You do plan on writing more, right? Because I'm addicted to your writings.
Yeah, I have a couple more in mind, yes.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on this program. Dr. Dean Radin, everybody. And it's deanradin.org, right? That's the new website?
That's right, yep.
All right. You guys, we're gonna be right back for hour 3 with Michael Deacon. Again, Dr. Dean Radin, thank you very much for coming on Lighting the Void. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
is out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTLK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
From Studio 303, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News for The Fringe FM, bringing light to the stories that surround us. Scientists have found 2 planets outside our solar system that could host extraterrestrial life. Scientists may have just come closer to answering questions about whether other planets in the universe may be able to support life. The researchers used data on UV levels required to make molecular structures needed within a functioning cell. The team used this data to search for planets receiving similar UV levels from stars nearby and have narrowed down the possibilities to 2 planets outside of our solar system. You can read more on this at businessinsider.com. NASA astronaut claims he witnessed an organic alien-like creature in the Space Shuttle payload bay. NASA engineer Leland Melvin made the astonishing claims during a discussion with a conspiracy theorist on social media. The former NFL football player says he spotted the creature in the payload bay of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, which was in orbit above the Earth at the time. When he told NASA about the sighting, space agency experts told Melvin the most likely explanation was ice had broken off and away from the shuttle, and it was the movement of these floating shards that caught his eye. You can read more of this at the Daily Mail online. Experts warn satellites could be hacked and used as giant radio frequency weapons as researchers gather in Las Vegas, Nevada to hunt for bugs in communication systems and voting machines. Researchers at the Black Hat Conference in Las Vegas warn satellites are vulnerable, says they could be hacked to leak information or even for cyber-physical attacks. Antennas could be used as radio frequency weapons, working much like a microwave. Over at the DEF CON conference, ethical hackers are looking into exposed vulnerabilities. They're creating Voting Village to spot bugs in devices like digital poll books. This story, too, is brought to you by the Daily Mail online. And is the current heat wave behind the major spike in calls to paranormal investigators? The scorching heat wave is being blamed for causing a massive increase in paranormal activities in people's homes around the Southwest region. This according to ghost hunter Gary Parsons of the Plymouth Paranormal Investigators, who say they have received a major spike in number of calls during the past 2 months. You can read more on this at bendedreality.com. And here's this week's fun fact. There's a Disney World ride that can help you pass kidney stones. After his patients reported passing stones while riding Big Thunder Mountain, urologist David Wartinger did some research by reportedly riding the coaster with a 3D kidney model. No matter their size, the stones inside the model passed from 16% to 100% of the time, depending on their location within the kidney and where he sat on the ride. And that wraps it up for another edition of the Stranger Than Fiction News, right here on the Fringe FM. And remember, you can save a life. Don't drive and text.
How you doing today, guys? This is Garrett Lee.
And this is Randy Warner.
From the Healers and Hellraisers podcast.
A podcast about people.
You're going to hear stories from the enlightening to the frightening.
Told by those who lived it.
Listen right here on the Fringe FM.
Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And on the Fringe Free-For-All, right here on the Fringe FM.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass, because you're listening to KTLK, the Fringe FM. Shifthead.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM. The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback@thefringe.fm.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We are live on the Fringe FM. Don't forget, after the program, coming up will be the Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable. And I have been getting some questions about the artists on here. So that is Bundy. That song is called Leopold by Bundy, which is a pal of Eric Markham's, which is my partner on the Fringe FM. And the guy rips on the guitar, and he let us use his music, and so that's why we are playing it heavily. There's that. And we just got through talking with Dr. Dean Radin about his book, Real Magic, and now we are here with none other than Michael Deacon, the host of the End of Days program, the Michael Deacon program that actually airs rebroadcasts on Saturday night. The new episodes come out on Sunday night. Michael, thank you so much for coming on Lighting the Void. It's been a long time since I've talked to you.
Oh, yes, it really has. And thank you so much for inviting me to your program. And of course, first and foremost, I do want to thank you for your for extending your hand, rather, and inviting me to be a part of your great network here, the Fringe FM.
Yeah, well, I've always wanted you on the network. You know that. I've been one of your fan faves, a secret admirer of the Michael Deacon program. And some of my best friends know that, too, because I love your show. I love your approach. I will say that people that know me best know that I appreciate folks that love the art of radio. I mean, there's podcasts, and then there's radio, and then there's people that really appreciate the art and the entertainment value of radio, and I consider you one of those people. And so it's my honor to have you on the network, actually.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I don't really like to be on anyone's network, to be blunt.
Yeah, I know. You're a rebel. I like that about you.
Well,
people figured that out about me. I mean, Richard Giordano is one. They're all three different men, okay, and three different characters, by the way. I'm not trying to put them in a box, but they're all pretty much rebels, you know. They've been kicked off networks and et cetera, but it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm attracted to people that are always pushing the boundaries of radio. I don't know.
No, I understand. I'm the same way. I do admire those who are more on the rebellious side, more controversial. They're a lot more fun to talk to, I realized.
And so, just for anybody that's never listened to your show, kind of give everybody a background about your show, what it's about, and what are your favorite things to discuss on the show.
You know, that's a good question, but very difficult to answer. There's so much to the program. There's lots of confusion out there. First of all, the program, the main focus point is on entertainment, and a lot of people don't realize that yet. So they get very angry about certain things that are discussed, but you have to keep in mind that the program, the element is entertainment. That's why they listen. That's why people listen to the program to begin with.
That's why I listen to it, because, I mean, it is kind of confusing. Like you'll have a guest on that has a pretty well-known background. Some call them A-listers as far as guests go. And, you know how to ask the right questions. I'll give you that. And then the next thing you know, you might be talking to a professional wrestler. And you're like, hey, what's this? You know, and to me, keeping the audience on their toes all the time, man, that's a good thing. So I appreciate it.
Right. I don't like to paint myself with just one brush, as they say. All sorts of walks of life do come onto the program, and lots of them, lots of times, aren't even aware of the gems that they're dropping live on the air.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Phil Hendry was good at that. Are you familiar with Phil Hendry?
Of course. I am a longtime fan of radio, just obsessed with everything. Most shows I have heard of out there that are currently playing, too. I tend to keep up with everything that's going on in the radio world. That's my autism right there.
The thing that I loved about his show was he played all the characters on his show, even the caller sometimes, right? He'd play the different hosts. Yeah. And callers would call in, and only certain people, now this was the old time, right? Only certain people would realize that he's playing all these characters, and then other people would just flat out fall for it and just go to cursing him out and telling him he's this and that, and he never faded once. He'd go right with it.
He never broke kayfabe. That's true. He was always in his gimmick, living it up. Living the gimmick is what he was doing and still doing today. And we're seeing a lot of that currently with Alex Jones, who's currently under all sorts of legal lawsuits going on with the children of Sandy Hook, and of course the ex-wife coming after him. It's quite outrageous, all the things going on in the world right now. Have you been keeping up with any of that noise?
Yeah, a little bit. I actually posted one of his rants that he went on Joe Rogan about on Facebook, and I mean, I could put up a picture of Alex Jones and put a question mark on his face, and I'd probably get 111 comments because he's so polarizing, because he's got quite a following, but I don't think people realize that this whole banning from YouTube and Facebook and everything that he talks about actually got more people to use his platform. There's that too.
Yeah, it did backfire a little bit there, right?
Yeah, it did. But I mean, then again, most of those people are using his apps and stuff. I mean, here's the thing, like that bothers me about Alex Jones. Yeah, he's very entertaining, but he also has a following of loyal people. Like right now, if I said, look, I don't like Alex Jones, that would be like me saying I don't like Donald Trump. Half the people would just turn the radio off, But so I kind of try to look at the big picture here. He is an entertainer. Does he really care about the truth, or is he entertaining? That's what I've always wondered about. Is he playing a role, or does he really believe what he's saying?
I think yes and no.
That's interesting you say that. So you think he does believe what he's saying, but he's also aware that maybe he's playing a role, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's good. So
I truly feel that way, but others out there, they can't really differentiate the two.
Yeah. And when I come on here, I'm not much of an entertainer. I like to be the guy that asks questions, But honestly, to be perfectly honest with you and my audience, I'm jealous of the entertainers. Because if I could be that kind of a radio host, that's probably what I do. But I just stick to the questions. I think I'm better at that.
Understood. And by the way, you did interview Dean Radin, who I totally missed completely here on the program, and I feel bad for it because I really do like and admire Mr. Radin very much. And the last time I talked to him, I believe, was in 2014.
Wow, yeah. Before that, I'll just give a little secret here. Before the show came on, and that's what I was doing, I was listening to all his old interviews, trying to find maybe something that I could ask that hasn't been asked. But he's been on so many radio shows and on so many TV shows that it's kind of hard to do. But I am glad that his new book is about magic. That's why I wanted to jump all over this while I could.
Yeah, you're really into that, the whole magic aspect of things. And when did all that begin for you, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it did. I would, probably in my late 20s when I just kind of fell into it. I fell into it because of a setback in my life, and it was a pretty huge setback.
You know what? Let me backtrack that question and ask: did you grow up in a religious household?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you're a Christian, or what, what's going on here?
So okay, so Christian that my dad would make me read the Bible. Like he would shut the door, and I had a little bitty room, and he'd be like, "You're going to go in there and read the Bible, boy." And I'd read the Bible, and I would have to listen to the Bible on tape as I read it by Alexander Scourby, the King James edition, for hours. So yeah, it was. I got Bible thumped. So
you didn't really like that. Yeah, those weren't good times for you, were they?
No, I never really did have two good experiences at church, but I won't say that I never had any good spiritual experiences as a Christian, because I did in my later years, but as a child, no, it was terrible.
Understood. And at what age? You said you were 20?
When I got into magic?
Right.
Yeah, I was in my late 20s when I got into that subject matter, because just like most people do, they find it in desperation. I think we find the biggest parts of ourselves and our character, and all the way down to spirit, when we're at the worst times of our life.
And I agree. It's very interesting that one must suffer to return to whatever one must turn to. If it's, say, God, for instance, you seem to have to go through some sort of weird tribulation before you can go back to the Father, per se.
Yeah, and I actually went into a library, not a library. That's not where I was. I was in Hastings, a bookstore. If anybody's familiar with Hastings, I think they shut down. But I was in there, and I was like, "Look, if whatever's out there, if you're listening to me, I want to know if God's real, because I'm sick of this. Right? Show me you're real." Almost like the dude did on that movie. I forget, The Devil's Rejects, where it's like, bring lightning down on my head right now if you're real, And a book fell off the shelf, and and I might have bumped it, but it may have been just a big coincidence. But the book hit my feet, and it was Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, which kind of opened up the mystic doors to everything, the consciousness model. And then I just went from there, and it led me into magic because I guess I wanted to be able to have control over things that I felt like I was a victim to.
And has magic played a more than significant role in how you turned out in life?
I am doing what I'm doing right now because of it.
Okay. So you are deeply entranced by this then?
Yeah. Astral travel, out-of-the-body experiences, and magic. And now, here recently, and people are going to be like, really, just now? But yes, here recently, ufology. I think it's all related.
And by the way, for those out there who are wondering, I'm not exactly a very religious person, I should say. I'm an agnostic atheist. I was going to say something else, but I probably shouldn't say that. But yeah, that's a better way of trying to sort of classify myself or box myself in, even though I don't really like titles.
Right.
But yeah, going back to...
What is an agnostic atheist, by the way? Tell me what that is. I know what an atheist is, but an agnostic atheist, I don't know if I've ever heard that term.
Well, it means I'm not exactly sure if there is a God or not. I can't really prove it to you. And the atheist part comes in because I guess it depends on my mood, to be honest with you. Sometimes I fall back to just being an atheist and not believing in a God. But that just is purely on how I feel at that time or day or night, whatever it is. But yeah, that's kind of how I would classify myself.
Yeah,
but I'm not against religion or any of that. I talk a lot about religion on my program.
Just some of the guests you've had on, by the way, that I'm extremely jealous of. I'd say the biggest show I'm jealous of is John B. Wells. I've emailed that guy a million times. He's one of my radio heroes. Would love to have him on this show, and he came on your show, and you guys had one hell of a conversation. It was really cool to listen to you two kick back and talk about it.
I believe I talked to him twice.
Did you? You had him on twice. Maybe I didn't hear the second interview then.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, many, many moons ago. But yeah, John is a great guy, and I'm so glad he's been very successful outside of Coast to Coast AM. And we've had some pretty funny conversations off the air in regards to Coast AM. But this is the part where I should stop talking now. I'm in trouble again.
Well, that happens.
I tend to do that.
Yeah, you tend to do that sometimes, but I do too. And what I will say is that on Sundays, and this is just in the spirit of you guys getting to hear good programs because there's so many choices out there now, we replay his new show on Sunday. So what you're hearing on Saturday night is actually a replay. If you want to catch, don't you usually air your live show on Saturday nights on your stream though, right? Or do you just kind of go with the flow?
Yeah, I'm live at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 p.m. Eastern Time on the TuneIn Radio app. If you search End of Days, you'll be able to find the program there.
I was really wanting to get you live here on this. Like, Michael, we go on at this time. This is the time we go on. Can you do that? And, you're like, I don't know. Probably not. And I'm thinking, I got to respect that, man. Like, the whole idea of doing radio is to have fun and get comfortable. The last thing you need is somebody trying to tell you what to do or how to do what you do, And it's just more pure that way.
It depends. Sometimes there's a guest who wants to stay on longer. But a way we could have worked that out is if I would have just ended the show and then just continued on my stream.
Yeah, we could do that still.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, we got a marathon coming up where Rich Giordano and I are going to try to go 48 hours without sleep and broadcast.
Oh, my God.
That's incredible. I don't know why he picked 48 hours, but that's what he picked. And I don't know if you want to be a part of that. I don't know. We're going to try to call all the hosts and make them a part of it, even if it's for 5 minutes. But we're not asking all the hosts to go 48 hours because that's just...
You better be careful.
Why?
Well, there's all sorts of people who die doing things like that.
Just from not sleeping?
You're going to end up like one of those people in China, those World of Warcraft players that die in those cafes out there.
Wait a minute. Are you serious? I've never heard of this, actually, and call me stupid, but people are dying from playing World of Warcraft?
Well, it's a combination of not eating or sleeping.
I told you guys. See? Didn't I tell you? This whole video game thing's getting out of control.
You haven't really heard about that?
No, I haven't, honestly.
It's been going on for a while now.
Since the game launched?
Yeah, well, yeah. Since the game launched.
Nobody in the U.S. has died from it, though, right?
No, there's people that have died in the U.S., I'm pretty sure.
From video games?
Yeah, from gaming and just staying up.
That's crazy, man.
It is ridiculous, I know. I was very into gaming a long time ago. And I had friends who would stay up probably from, they'll go hard at 9 and they'll probably wrap up by 6 or 7 a.m. And this was a time of the whole LAN party thing.
Yeah, I remember that. Halo. I used to participate in those, actually, when Halo first came out. Or Halo 2, I think.
But that was on a PC at one time?
No. Halo 2, I had the
Xbox.
The Xbox LAN parties that we had. And
Right.
Now I've just confessed to something that I've never talked about before. Yeah, but yeah, I used to escape. I was married at the time. My ex, like, where are you going? And, when you leave your house, your wife's going to think you're doing all kinds of things. But I was really just playing video games.
You were married at one time?
Yes, sir.
My goodness, what was that like for you? It was kind of like torture, right?
Well, it was cool, but I will say that it wasn't cool, actually. I had a very cool relationship with a woman for 4 years, and naturally, I was brought up a Christian, and then we found out that little Corbin was coming, and I thought it was the right thing to do, was to get married. And boy, was I wrong.
And you were wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
You talking about magic, there is a thing that Frederick Xavier talks about in magic, that contracts are a part of magic. That we're signing contracts every day. For example, when you sign your name to a piece of paper, that magically puts you in that contract, and you have to fulfill it, because if you don't, there's a karmic thing that happens. Now, that sounds kind of foo-foo, right? But if you look at the statistics on divorce, I would say that there might be something to that.
It is interesting, though, here in America, that so many people are either divorced or getting divorced.
Yeah, because here's why. This is my theory on what happens. And if you're married, please don't get mad at me when I say this. But you love somebody, you love them with your whole heart, and you have the choice to leave at any point in time. When you got a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever you got, you still have that choice. I can leave.
Isn't it amazing, though, that there's some women out there and men, and they'll get into a domestic dispute with their partner, and of course the cops come, and let's say the male, in this case, hit the wife, and let's say maybe she embellished some things, or vice versa. There's different situations that could happen, and people lie, and depending who that individual is, they could really ruin your life and get you in trouble in your professional life for a domestic dispute. And your job has nothing to do with your significant other. But here in today's America, my goodness, you're most likely to get fired. Yeah. Even something on Twitter, you rub someone the wrong way.
I've seen that happen too. That's a tragedy.
It's really horrific what's going on in America right now. And I'm not quite sure many people are even fully oblivious to what's going on. Most really want to just tune out. And I don't blame them, because, politics right now, it's kind of in a slippery slope. That's another thing that really gets people triggered, and another subject that I love talking about, because it gets so many people
triggered,
angry with me. Yeah, there's lots of people who get really pissed off at me.
Yeah.
I've gotten death threats, all sorts of different things. A lot of people do not like me, and that's okay.
Why? You seem like a decent enough guy. Why would somebody not like you and want to kill you?
I think it's my demeanor. I think it's because they know that sometimes I say things in a manner that goes over the guest's heads rather. And sometimes, there's a lot of things that I say that can be taken in a very negative way. And lots of these people don't really know that the show is kind of on the entertainment side.
Yeah. So you've got that whole thing where let's say your perfect guest would be like Madman Markham, right? Somebody that could create a black hole in their basement.
Well, I wouldn't say he was a perfect guest,
but it would be I would love to hear Madman Markham on your show.
It was a joke, but yes.
Yeah. But see, that went over my head. You guys caught that? So that would be the perfect guest. I'm not saying you don't take everybody seriously, but I do catch it sometimes. I've caught myself listening to your show going, is he being sarcastic or is he serious?
Right. I just have a very dry sense of humor.
Well, I'm sure the Brits will love that.
I've dabbled in stand-up comedy before, lots of open mic nights, and that's kind of translated into what I do here on the program.
Wow. Well, it's a cool program. I know that. Now it makes you wonder if you're being like the listener. Sometimes I wonder. It makes me feel like did I miss that? Did I miss the sarcasm there?
It makes you think. It's food for thought, and that's what I love about the program. That it's an open platform, an open environment to discuss all sorts of things, good or bad. But of course, at the end of the day, the whole essence of the show is good versus evil,
right?
Because that's what we're going through right now.
Well, I'm wondering what your take on magic is. I'm wondering what you think
about magic per se.
Yeah, like not Harry Potter magic, but the kind of the magic that Dean Radin's talking about.
Well, what kind was he talking about?
All of it. Let's see, ceremonial magic, just lighting candles and saying prayers, using the tarot, divination, things of that nature.
Like seances and black magic, that type of stuff?
Yeah, I guess any type of magic like that. Are you convinced? They're totally convinced that it's not real?
See, this is where
it's a trap.
This is kind of where I'm on the fence because I can't really prove it or disprove it at times.
Right. Well, I will say that, divorce was what made me believe in black magic. And I'm not playing when I say that. That's not a joke.
Black magic.
Yeah, we got to take a little break here, but I will talk about black magic as far as what I learned black magic was. And we can start with contracts and how I think, this is just my opinion, that a lot of us are under some type of black magic spell, and then we can listen to Michael make fun of me as I discuss it. That sounds like fun.
Joe, I had no idea you turned your back on God.
Oh, man, I didn't turn my back on God, but some people would like to believe that. That's a good one. We'll be right back with Michael Deacon from the End of Days program. Don't go anywhere.
Listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Rich Giordano here from the Paranormal Code. I'm now live Monday through Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on The Fringe FM. See you there.
Want to know what's on The Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out! That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-717-WAVE, 888-717-WAVE, or visit dryhealthyhome.com. Dryhealthyhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Mal Duquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts. Lighting the Void is proud to announce Mind and Magic's Protection and Defense Course for protection from magical and psychic attacks. This is not a joke. Magic practitioners are on the rise, and with that comes attacks from baneful or black magicians that try to harm or hurt others for their own selfish reasons. If you are not a believer in psychic attacks, then this isn't for you. If you are, and you want the power to defend yourself and your family and home, then I highly suggest you grab Freighter Xavier's Protection and Defense Course. In this course, you will learn how to tell if you are under attack from a natural source or if an individual is attacking you. The 4 forms of curses and attacks. How to remove self-imposed curses. The correct way to cleanse your home from negativity or malevolent entities. How to make your own holy water. What you should always keep near or under your bed. Herbs that banish negativity and promote purity. The most powerful banishing rituals on the planet. And for those that seem to want to harm you the most, how to put your enemies in a hell pit of their own making. You can also learn protection against shadow people and other entities. Or are you just in a bad planetary alignment? Even how to get rid of an enemy using a tic-tac box. It does not matter what your faith or belief is, this will work. Click the banner on the website at lightingthevoid.com or go to lightingthevoid.com/Xavier.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We're live on KTLK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM. The website for the network is thefringe.fm. We're here with Michael Deacon from the End of Days program, the Michael Deacon program, which is a host that airs on the weekends on the Fringe FM, and also you can hear his show on this website as well. Michael, can you give everybody your website too, real quick, while I'm thinking about it?
Right, that's michaeldeacon.com, and I am the host and producer of a very unique program, and I am not a right-wing wacko or a convicted felon.
That's good. I guess that's a good start, right?
It is. That's a great start.
You're not yeah, there's a lot of that going on out there right now, actually. It's a great start. Not to be a convicted felon or a right-wing wacko.
I mean, there's lots of them out there that are just, and I would not want to classify myself as one, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I don't consider myself right-wing or left-wing, but, I can tell you guys this guy's talent already. He's only been on here 30 minutes. I haven't talked to him forever, and he's already gotten me talking about my divorce, That's
right. You turn your, so going back, you turn your back on God. Let's start there.
I didn't turn my back on God. I had doubts, actually. You're right. I had doubts.
It's hilarious. I'm bringing this up when I'm the agnostic atheist here.
Yeah, I've got an email the other day. Actually, there's a review on iTunes. I think it's iTunes. I forget where it is. That says this is, you get the 4 stars, the 5-star, and then some guy named Ray that comments 2 or 3 times. This show's terrible. Second comment. This guy's anti-Christian, and then you got everybody else sticking up for me. Get out of here, Ray. It's funny just to watch that happen. Like the reviews turn into a forum. But anyways, Ray, I'm not anti-Christian. There was a time when I turned my back on God, but I turned my back because I wanted things to make sense. That's all. I just wanted things to make sense at that point in my life.
So you found yourself in the chaos of life, per se. And once this happened, where were your parents? Where was your father?
Well, my father he's kind of one of those guys that's like, yep, could have saw that coming,
I see. Have you forgiven your father?
You're right. I hate my father. No, I have forgiven him, actually.
That's good. That's a very important thing, and it has nothing to do with what religion anyone is. It's something that everyone must do is go back and forgive your mom or father.
Yeah, well, if you look at how he was raised, I can see where it comes from, actually. And my dad's a good guy,
I mean, he means well in his heart, but, some things happen in life, and some people go a little crazy, and people are just people. Mm-hmm. Your dad, they're just as oblivious as everyone else walking down Avenue 9th and C in New York. That's a very bad spot, by the way. And but yeah, everyone's normal. There's people that just don't know what's going on, and some people make mistakes.
Yeah,
that's what life is. But you must forgive your mom and dad.
Well, the reality of it is when the reason why I turned to the esoteric, I'll tell you this and why, is because I was a good dad. I did nothing wrong. I didn't cheat. I didn't do anything. I mean, I wasn't the perfect husband. And, the next thing you know, everything's getting ripped away from you.
No.
Your kid, your money, your life, everything's taken. And you didn't do anything wrong. Not really, you didn't, I didn't cheat. I probably wasn't the best husband. I wasn't abusive. But it's just one of those things where people get tired of each other. And that's okay. It really is okay when people get tired of each other. But
people grow apart.
It's not okay when the child gets ripped away from one parent or the other, and then the parents want to get involved, right?
Yeah.
And they want to get involved and say, well, the kid needs to live here and the kid needs to live there and whatever. It just turns into a mess, all for nothing. Just 2 young people starting out, fall in love. It's innocent as can be, and the next thing you know, it ends in chaos, and there's a kid involved. And how many times does that happen, right? I could tell this whole story, but I'm just telling a story that happens all the time.
Indeed. And I'm very sorry that you had to experience this, and many men will experience this sort of thing, and sometimes women too out there.
Yep. And I knew this would happen when he got older, and now my son lives with me, and
that's good.
Yeah, but there's some other things that I just can't forgive, it's one of those deals where stepdads get involved, and it's a whole personal thing that you're like.
So, Joe, you still have anger then?
I still have anger towards certain people, yeah.
It's okay. That's a normal thing, but you have to overcome your anger eventually.
I feel like you're sitting in the recliner and I'm on the couch and you're taking notes or something. This is kind of weird.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. But this is a very important conversation to have, though.
Yeah.
Because lots of people, they just let this sort of thing go and don't ever bring it up or talk about it. But this is good. This is progress. This is something that everyone needed to hear. And this is a very positive thing.
You think?
I honestly think so. 100%. It's very good to get this out there, because if you just bottle everything up and suppress it, it's just going to eat you alive. So this is why I'm telling you, you have to eventually let go of this anger, or else it's just going to consume you. You're never going to be happy in life unless you forgive and let it go. And I know it's completely hard to do, because there's even one person in my life who I don't want to forgive. And it goes back to a time when I was physically attacked by this person.
Ooh.
And there's not a day that goes by in my mind where I don't want to look this person up where he lives and physically cause him harm. And this is something that happened to me when I was in high school. And I'm not even in high school anymore, and yet I still think about going over there to a completely different city and perhaps doing something that I would regret in life.
Like the Good Will Hunting thing, you remember me from kindergarten, and just tears him apart?
Pretty much. Something along those lines. Yeah, that's a great comparison, but it's a little psychotic to even think about that, but it's kind of the truth. And every day I do let go of it, but every now and then it sort of creeps back in my mind. And I think it has lots to do with a pride and ego type of thing, because I truly believe that incident that happened to me sort of made me want to further get involved in self-defense. And that's probably what sort of sparked everything with my obsession with jiu-jitsu. And I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for such a long time now. And so, again, not a day goes by in my mind where I'm thinking, man, I would just love to go back to that time and knowing what I know now and just completely physically harming this individual. But, that's not going to happen anymore. I would never do that now.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of one of the reasons why I think we lose faith, right? Because we're taught, they'll get what they deserve. The bully never wins. Karma this, and what goes around comes around. And yet real life will show you that the bully gets away with a lot of stupid stuff. Bad people get away with stupid stuff,
Here comes that suffering part I'm telling you about. You have to experience that to first think about things and let them go.
Yeah. That was a harsh reality to me, that, you get what you don't deserve, actually, sometimes. But it happens. I really think spiritually it happens for a reason. But this was my point when I was talking to Dean Radin about teaching magic to certain people, because, say, somebody wasn't as psychologically well-rounded as you are. Let's just assume that you're psychologically well-rounded. You're a good person. You don't have any forms of psychosis, but you got into magic, and you'd be fine. But what if you did have a grudge against this person, and you picked up an old grimoire, and you realized that black magic was real, and you wanted to hurt this person? In my opinion, you could get away with it, and that's bad. And see, that's why I think certain people shouldn't mess with it.
Yeah, and that's when it comes back to good versus evil. Is that good or is that evil? Is that right or is that wrong?
Well, there's that question. Like I will tell you this: there's an order out there that's called. And I don't want them attacking me, but I just want to make people aware that there are really black magic orders out there that justify really bad things. I mean, there's an order called, I think it's called the Order of the Nine Angles or something like that. I'm saying something like that because I don't want them attacking me, but I don't care if they do, actually. I'm good and protected. But they justify human sacrifice in their writings. And for all we know, they're doing it right now.
That's not good.
No, it's not. But these things exist, and so that's why I talk about it. I also talk about magic because it can Like, it helped me get to where I am today. I mean, I'm not rich. Actually, I've never been this poor in my life, but I'm much happier now than I've ever been, to be honest with you.
That's good. You probably extended your life for a further duration of time, opposed to, say, maybe your neighbor or one of your best friends who are in the same situation as you. Take me, for example. I don't have any kids, so I don't have that sort of stress in my life. I don't have those sort of worries in my life. Lots of people of my age, they look horrid, and they have kids, and they have an ex-wife, or so forth and so forth. But I'm just lucky enough, I say, not to have any of these things in my life. And
How old are you, by the way, if you don't mind me asking?
By the way, let me quickly say, and I don't mean to offend anyone by any means when I say these things. I'm just saying, I'm seeing these things from the outside. All my peers out there who are married, who have kids, lots of them out there are not happy. And it does make me worry a little bit. Makes me think, am I going to be in this sort of situation when I get married? If I get married?
That's a good thing to think about. I mean, you remember me telling you that book that fell off the shelf, right? Conversations with God?
Right.
Well, I don't know that the guy really talked to God, but God told him in this book, in Advanced Societies, that, and I think it was book 3 or whatever, that in advanced societies, the way that they do kids is that the couple will have the child, but they won't really raise them. An adult, like an elderly person, will do the raising, because that society learned that these people were still young and they had a child, and their stresses would go and screw the child all up. So they don't give their child away. They still love them and they're there for them and stuff. But as far as who makes sure they go to school, raises them and teaches them and watches out for them, it's the elderly. And it seemed to work and function better in that society. And I thought about that. I know it sounds kind of wacko, but we don't do that. We have... Everybody has kids when they're the most stressed, when they're at their hardest times, they have kids, you know?
But our generation is so much different from our parents' generation. Just completely different. And I'm 30 years old.
Yeah, you're right. But I do know that I have a few friends that were raised by their grandparents because they were adopted, right?
I hear you. That single parent household thing, it really does affect you in many ways. And I've seen it when I was growing up, even as a younger kid. One of my earliest memories was back in, say, I think it was sixth or seventh grade, perhaps, maybe even fifth grade. Even back then, I realized some of the kids that were raised in that single parent household with just a single mother, or a sister, no male influence at all. I sort of seem to pick up on sort of feminine tendencies in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean this in a joking manner either, but this is sort of something I saw in the behavior traits of these children, and I've seen this in a lot.
Well, what I was trying to say was, and what I meant to say is that the children that I've seen raised by elderly, like for instance, they're really my uncles, but blood, they're my cousins. Zach is a cousin of mine that was on my show, but he was actually adopted by my grandmother. And they turn out to be, I'm not saying better children, but they just don't have the issues that the rest of us have. For some reason, and I know I've got friends like that were raised by elderly people that for some reason they just turn out, I don't know, more centered. And maybe it's just my experience, but it seems to me like if the elderly, because what do we do with our elderly? We put them in nursing homes and, just talk to them every now and then. And that's all they want to do is be around the youth and talk to them and do things like that.
And of course, it's not all, but most.
Right. And so that's my point. I think they would raise kids better than like say me and my ex going through a divorce, and we've got a toddler there who needs to be around something more stable, something more secure while that's happening. And that goes back to my point where you shouldn't feel bad about those things. I don't think it's offensive at all when you talk about maybe I shouldn't have a kid, or I'm glad I didn't get involved with these situations,
Well, maybe so soon in life, because those situations could have happened to me, but I played them out a little differently in my mind, so I didn't go through with certain situations.
Yeah, I see your point. See, you're talking about your personal life now, too. That's great. I love it. Mm-hmm. Now I don't feel alone.
That's right. I know. I don't mean to put you on the spot here. It's just I think it's great that we're having this discussion. And I'm sure you don't really get to talk about these sort of things with anyone.
No, I don't. I really don't. I don't like talking about my...
No one does.
Exes and stuff like that. But, I'm a human. It's happened to me.
I do really appreciate your honesty, though. I do love this sort of thing. I really enjoy this sort of interaction with anyone I can get, and sort of get through to them in a way, in a very personal way, because I really do feel some of the things I do say can help you out in life. Because I've been in so many different situations that I can't even talk about here on the air, and I probably can't even talk about them on my own program.
Yeah, I understand that totally. I really do. But, the reason why I push talking about the esoteric and magic a lot. And I'm not the guy that talks about, even though I've had guests on that talk about it, I'm not the kind of guy that talks about crystals and stargates and stuff. I'm interested in those things, definitely. But I mean more of a practical magic type way where, you could do a little prayer or light a candle and set your intent, and these things really happen. And I believe in that. And maybe it's just my experience. But when I have guests on like Thomas Campbell or Dean Radin,
right,
it feels so validating. And that's not the whole reason why I have them on. It's like there's a message that I'm trying to share with everybody, but I can't really do it without these people,
I'm with you on that. Tell me a little bit more about Dean. What's he up to nowadays? You said he has a new book.
Yeah, his new book is called Real Magic. So he's, of course, everybody that's listened to Dean Radin before, he's been on the radio for years, even back when Art Bell was on Coast to Coast, and he's the head scientist at IONS now, the Institutional for Noetical Studies. I probably butchered that, but just a massive background as far as education goes, and is really a mover and shaker in the field of consciousness, and has always just talked about consciousness. But now he put a book out about magic, and magic is a taboo thing, right? It's one thing to talk about consciousness and meditation and the reality of it, and it's really cool. But talking about magic is taboo because it scares some people, magic. Ooh. Like some guys doing a spell, that kind of magic, that scares people.
Well, I mean, going to church, you're doing magic there as well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, especially the Catholics. Catholic churches.
Why do you think you feel the way you do when you go in there and there's people singing? There's magic going around.
Right. Did you ever go to church, by the way?
No, actually. My parents actually let me be more of a free thinker. But my mother, she was more on the religious side. Luckily, it was Dad who was more of the open-minded, who believed in extraterrestrials and the paranormal. He himself was also into all that sort of stuff growing up.
And that's cool. So he'd like to have parents like that.
He loves my show, which is kind of ridiculous because, well, I think that about everyone. Anytime someone tells me they like my show, I think, wow, that's ridiculous. Insane. Yeah. How do you like the show? Really?
I love your show, man. Is it ridiculous because I love it?
No, it's not. It's just I'm a very harsh critic on myself, and I always think I don't do such a good job at times.
Well, we don't all have, hardcore nights, like the best nights. I mean, I've had nights where, you have a guest on, and some people don't have guests, and you think it's going to be the best show ever, and it turns out to just be a flop. I mean, it happens sometimes, but
Yeah, they can't all be home runs, and that's another reason why I don't really listen to too many.
You don't listen to anybody's show, do you?
Not really, to be honest with you. I don't really. I listen to shows, but they're not in this field at all. I listen to comedy shows, to be honest with you.
What's your favorite show?
My favorite show right now is from a comedian by the name of Kevin Brennan. He has a podcast called Burning Bridges and another one called Misery Loves Company. And, well, he pretty much goes after everyone. And once I heard him, I thought, holy hell, I found my new co-host. We kind
have him on.
Well, I tried, but he's a very angry individual. So it's probably never going to happen. His brother is actually Neil Brennan, who was the writer for the Chappelle Show.
Can I ask you a question before we get out of here that
Sure.
I'm really curious about, and it's kind of out of left field? What's your opinion about John Lear? We've both talked to him. What do you think about the fellow?
John Lear was just on my show last night.
I love John Lear. I really like the guy.
I really do. I view him like I view Jordan Maxwell, like my grandfather in a way, and same with Mr. Jim Fetzer. I view these older men sort of like a grandfather type, and I've even met Jordan Maxwell and I ate lunch with him, and nice. He even put his arm around me to walk him, and I thought, my God, my grandfather does this all the time to me. So it made me laugh once he did that. It was just so natural. I thought, okay, here we go. And of course, everyone's staring at me thinking, what the hell? Well, who's this guy?
Well, it's really good to hear you say that, because in the near future, we're going to do a type of a fundathon, a telethon for Jordan, because I think he deserves it. And I don't know how successful we're going to be, but after seeing what happened to him and all his work, yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. So if you're not doing anything, you could chime in. I don't know when we're going to do it, but
sure.
Yeah, you know his story, right? I'm sure he's told you.
I talked about it with him personally, and I talked about his experience with David Icke and how David basically owes Jordan a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He brought him here to America.
Right.
Kind of did his material too.
Yeah, I mean, he was there before it all, and I really respect the guy. And we do got to get out of here right now. So you guys, what time is your show going to be on this weekend?
You know what? I don't think I'm going to be on this weekend. I'm probably not going to be here live. I might be out of town.
Well, normally it comes on what time then?
Normally at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And, of course, I invite everyone out there to tune in. It's a great show. It's a great time. It's kind of like what we just had here. A little sample of that.
And the website again real quick, Michael?
michaeldeacon.com.
There you go, folks.
AELDECON.
Thank you so much for coming on the third hour with me, Michael. I appreciate it, man.
No problem. Until next time. Good night.
There you go. We got to get out of here. This show is produced by the Fringe FM and cannot be, let's just say, syndicated without written permission. The music was by Chronox, Bundy, Kevin MacLeod, and Space Station. See you guys next week. Good night.